Very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. On today's show, how scammers are using AI to generate fake adverts using journalists from national news organisations, including Sky News.
And in sport, Trent Alexander-Arnold scored the winner for Liverpool to leave them on the brink of a record-equalling 20th league title.
It's almost there. It's Monday, the 21st of April.
Important news for all iPhone owners.
What you're seeing is not real. Sky News reveals thousands of deepfake adverts designed to scam the public into betting with illegal casinos. Also ahead, blasts shake Ukrainian cities after President Putin's Easter truce expires. Growing calls on the Prime Minister to set out where he stands on the Supreme Court's gender ruling after a weekend of protests. Gatwick is the UK's worst airport for flight delays, according to the Civil Aviation Authority.
There's action from the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix as Oscar Piastri replaces his McLaren teammate Lando Norris at the top of the Drivers' Championship.
Very good morning to you. What happens when we can't believe our own eyes? Well, scammers using AI technology have created deepfake adverts using Sky News journalists to promote illegal casinos, masquerading, though, as children's games. The revelation has led to calls for action from the Gambling Commission and the National Crime Agency. Our science and technology reporter, Mickey Carroll, is one of the journalists used in the scam, and she has this report.
Important news for all iPhone owners. Apple CEO Tim Cook has unveiled an app that will earn money for anyone who owns an iPhone.
Late last year, Sky News presenter Matt Barbette and I realised that we'd been deep-faked. Scammers had used our faces to advertise a gaming app that promised players huge sums of money.
My winnings were £500,000. Yesterday, I already bought the car I dreamed of.
But what seemed like one fairly shoddy deepfake revealed a complex scam operation with fraudsters using thousands of videos of deepfake journalists to promote illegal apps.
Apple has decided to reward all its iPhone users with money.
The majority of the apps were being hosted on Apple's App Store. They initially looked like children's games featuring cartoons and lively descriptions, and many had a 4+ age rating. But once installed, app after app opened up to illegal, unlicensed casinos. The Gambling Commission told us that they were very concerned about what we'd found.
If you're gambling on an illegal casino, there's no protection for you. Your financial data could be harvested, stolen and misused elsewhere. Your personal data, there are no protections in place for you at all. We've been in touch with Apple already to understand what safeguards they've got in place.
Apple told us that the casinos had often been hidden within the code of legitimate-looking games. When Apple's developers vetted the apps, they couldn't see the casinos. But as soon as those apps were published, the simple childlike games disappeared and were replaced with illegal slots, roulettes and more. Cybersecurity experts even told us that the original games that Apple saw were likely to be AI generated to speed up the process for scammers. To make the scam even more believable, the criminals used the names of real companies on the App Store. A marketing company in Wales, a young people's charity in New York, a company based here in Soho that helps people pay the correct utility bills. They were all named as the owners of these apps, which potentially reassured Apple that the apps were legitimate. But the companies had no idea that their names were being used.
First of all, there's a real sense of panic. I think it's really important to us that our customers trust us. This doesn't breed trust. This looks like we're doing something different. This looks like we're using our name and our brand to do something totally different, which we're not.
Apple quickly removed the apps we flagged to them, and the Gambling Commission took action to block the casinos as well. But while criminals are able to wield powerful tools like generative AI, the onus falls on consumers to stay alert to the risks posed by scammers. Mickey Carroll, Sky News.
Mari's here. Good morning. Happy Easter, Mari. Have you ever been deepfake scammed?
I have not been deepfaked, thank God, although, touch wood, famous last words. No, I haven't, but it's horrendous. And it's actually really quite scary about how good some of these deepfakes are. So, yeah, massively concerning. Great report from Sky News.
I've had a couple now, and like even me looking back at a version of me, they always make me sound more camp. Always make me sound more camp. But even me looking at a version of me, like it's not a bad version. And you think that the tech is only going to get better. The quality of the scams, unfortunately, are only going to improve, and people are only going to get duped more and more and more. And I think the reality is, like, people like us, anybody watching, we are pawns in a game that is being played by professionals as well. It's deeply worrying.
Yeah, I've been told apparently AI, the one thing it's not very good at is hands. So they always say apparently in AI videos, if you can, look at the hands, and often the hands they do weird things, there's extra fingers, apparently AI is terrible with hands, apparently that's a good giveaway, but not every video will have a hand in it, so,
No.
you know.
And David, the director, has been talking about this scam all morning, and he points out the fact that the text doesn't look as it should do, that the sync between the audio and the people's faces and lips aren't synced either. So there's kind of little bits, if you really do start looking into it, it's not as good as maybe it first appears. We're going to have, actually, Mickey's later on in the programme. She's going to come and join us, and we'll talk more about this at 8, the real version of Mickey as well, not the scam version of Mickey. But Mari, I want to talk to you about the front pages of some of the papers, including the Daily Mail, kind of talk about the Supreme Court judgment of last week and how Number 10 and the Labour Party are responding to it, and the pressure that's mounting on Sir Keir to pass some comment about what was decided.
Yeah, exactly that. So the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, really, their front pages both trying to say that it's time to hear from the Prime Minister. It's important to remember the Prime Minister has been on holiday. It's been the Easter holidays, so not necessarily surprising that we haven't heard from him yet. But nonetheless, some people are arguing, and campaigners that are quoted in those newspapers, that they feel that actually it's important enough that the PM maybe should have broken his silence, as it were, to comment on the Supreme Court ruling. But it's really, really tricky. We know how much of a kind of toxic and divisive debate this can be, and politically, therefore, it can be dangerous. Now, just for background, for those who perhaps weren't reading the news over the weekend, understandably, basically, there's been a bit of a fallout because some Labour MPs and ministers were reported to have written in WhatsApp groups about the Supreme Court ruling. So Dame Angela Eagle, who is a Home Office minister, she was reported to have said that some of the Equality and Human Rights Commission guidance that could come out of that Supreme Court ruling could potentially be catastrophic, and that there were some signs that public bodies were perhaps overreacting. And then a Labour MP called comments from the Equality and Human Rights Commission chairwoman, Baroness Faulkner, appalling. And then Chris Bryant, who is a culture minister, replied, agreed. And so there has been pressure on Number 10 and perhaps the Whip's office in Parliament to kind of take action and discipline them for kind of making those comments and perhaps being seen to be undermining the Supreme Court ruling. However, what's been reported in the papers this morning is that Number 10 saying that they haven't really done anything wrong, and therefore they won't need to be, reprimanded. Now, we've been trying to speak to Number 10 about this morning. So far, we've had radio silence. That perhaps speaks volumes in itself. But if we do hear anything from Number 10 on this, we'll bring it to you. And so that's the row that was unfolding, and therefore those two papers that I mentioned earlier are saying that it's time to perhaps discipline those MPs who were mentioned in that WhatsApp reporting, but also it's time to hear from the Prime Minister himself, and they want to know exactly how and to what extent he supports that Supreme Court ruling.
Mari, joining us from our Westminster studio, thank you so much. Approaching 7:10 on an Easter Monday morning, President Putin's Easter truce with Ukraine has expired. It did so at midnight local time on Sunday, and there are reports this morning of Russian strikes on the eastern Ukrainian city Mykolaiv, and sirens have also sounded in the capital Kyiv. The US President, Donald Trump, says he's hoping that a peace deal could be announced this week. He posted on Truth Social, writing, "Hopefully, Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do big business with the United States of America, which is thriving, and make a fortune." Well, Donald Trump is under renewed calls to sack his Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. The New York Times has reported he shared details of an attack on Yemen last month on a second group chat, including his wife and brother. They're the same strikes that were leaked to a journalist who was accidentally included in discussions about plans for the operation. Well, in Yemen, Houthi rebels report that US airstrikes on Sunday killed at least 12 people. The Trump administration says the strikes are part of a campaign to prevent Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. An Israeli military investigation has found there were several professional failures after they killed 15 Palestinian aid workers in Gaza last month. A Sky News investigation revealed how the attack unfolded, contradicting the IDF's official account of the killings. Nicole Johnston has more.
Professional failure, a series of operational mistakes. These are the findings of the Israeli military's investigation into its attack on a medical convoy in Gaza that killed 15 Palestinian aid workers. Israeli troops buried their bodies and the crushed vehicles in the sand. The military, under pressure to explain its actions, has released a statement. It says, the deputy commander failed to identify the fire truck and ambulances, blaming it on poor night visibility. He opened fire. The rest of the battalion followed. He has now been dismissed. The statement also said removing the bodies was reasonable under the circumstances, but the decision to crush the vehicles was wrong, and there was no attempt to conceal the event. At the heart of the matter is the identities of those killed. Israel again claimed that 6 were members of Hamas, but it has provided no evidence of this.
First of all, as the IDF said, and we've been gathering the evidence around this from the very beginning and taking our time to do so, is that 5 or possibly 6 members of the people that were in that ambulance have links to Hamas.
Sky News' own investigation didn't find any proof the medics were associated with Hamas. It was the video found on the phone of one of the medics killed that provided the first real evidence of what happened. It proved the convoy did have its lights on, and medics were wearing high-vis vests, contradicting an earlier statement by the military. Israel's story has changed since the bodies were recovered, and calls for an independent investigation are growing.
There remains evidence that it may well be a war crime, and it's something that should be investigated as a possible war crime, and it should be investigated by the International Criminal Court, which is the only international court capable of conducting a criminal investigation into something like this. The report that's been produced may engender in some people the suspicion that it's a whitewash, and what Israel needs to do right now is to take steps to avoid that inference becoming a conclusion.
In a briefing to journalists, the Israeli military said an hour before the convoy attack, it fired on a vehicle it thought was Hamas. It later discovered it wasn't. This investigation is no consolation for the families of the medics. The convoy had gone out, looking for a missing ambulance and its crew. By the end of the night, they too had all disappeared and never made it home. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Jerusalem.
If you scan the QR code on your screen now, you can watch 2 hours of terror. The Sky News investigation into how Israel's deadly attack on the aid workers unfolded. Watching Sky News, just an update now from the Reuters news agency, quoting Ukraine's Air Force, saying that Russia launched 96 drones, 3 missiles as well, in overnight attacks on Ukraine. No figures on how many might have been intercepted and any damage or casualties. But we are hearing 96 drones and 3 missiles in overnight attacks on Ukraine. That's according to the country's Air Force. And just one other thing of note, we're also hearing that Norway's Prime Minister is set to meet with Donald Trump on April the 24th. That's according to the Norwegian Prime Minister's office. We'll bring you more details on that, where it's going to take place. I assume the US, but we'll bring you more as we get it. Let's bring up to speed some of the day's other stories, shall we? The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, travelling to Washington today to meet with economic leaders at the International Monetary Fund conference. Discussions expected to focus on the impact of US tariffs on the world economy. A murder investigation is underway after a woman was found stabbed to death in Enfield in North London. The 45-year-old victim pronounced dead at the scene after police were called at around 7 p.m. on Saturday. The family of a student who was murdered in South London 10 years ago have launched an appeal for help. 21-year-old Ola Raji was gunned down and stabbed as he cycled home at night through Peckham. Crime Stoppers are offering a £20,000 reward for information leading to a conviction. Scottish water staff will stage a 2-day walkout on Tuesday and Wednesday in a dispute over pay. Unison, which represents over 1,000 staff, say emergency repairs and water quality checks will not be carried out during the strike. Scottish Water says there are contingency plans to maintain a normal service. The Prince and Princess of Wales are set to spend their 14th wedding anniversary in Scotland, celebrating rural communities. William and Kate will spend 2 days on the Isle of Mull, meeting farmers, craftspeople and local residents. Now then, Gatwick named the UK's worst airport for delayed flights for a second year in a row. Departures, on average, more than 23 minutes behind schedule in 2024, according to data from the Civil Aviation Authority. Sadi Chowdhury's here for more on this. Take us through the results then, because it's not just data on Gatwick, is it?
No, this is data on all 22 commercial airports across the UK, and all of them have at least 1,000 flights going out each year. So Gatwick Airport, obviously the second busiest airport for the country. It is, I think there are something like every 55 minutes a flight is either landing or taking off there. So you have to put some of this into context. It was also one of those airports that was affected by the air traffic control issues last year, and we are set to see more of that this year. So let's have a look at the data. Departures from Gatwick Airport were on average more than 23 minutes behind schedule last year. This is, again, according to analysis of Civil Aviation Authority data. Flights from Birmingham Airport had the second worst record last year with an average delay of more than 21 minutes. And in third place was Manchester Airport with a 20-minute average delay. And we can compare that to Belfast City, which performed the best in terms of punctuality. Second year in a row, a typical delay per flight of less than 12 minutes, so 11 minutes and 36 seconds to be precise. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, 23 minutes, when you've got a 2-week holiday booked or something like that, but it does have a knock-on effect, especially for passengers who are having sort of transit passengers who have ongoing connections and coach tickets and stuff like that. Also, air traffic control isn't considered one of those reasons that can justify paying out compensation. So a lot of passengers end up being financially at a disadvantage because of them. And so this chart of all these airports is something perhaps passengers want to look at before they book their flights, because it can lead to delays further on.
That's the runners and riders and those that are doing better, and for Gatwick's point, worse. What are Gatwick saying about this?
So Gatwick Airport says that air traffic control issues continue to affect it. A spokesperson put out this statement saying, together with our airlines, we've put in place a robust plan to improve on-time performance further in 2025. Gatwick is the world's most efficient single-runway airport, with flights departing or arriving every 55 seconds. And I have to say, there has been some improvement on the year before, which was 27-minute delays. So coming up to 23 is certainly an improvement.
Sadi, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's take you through the morning's front pages now, shall we? On the front page of the Eye, security fears over the government's planned mini-nuclear power stations across the UK. Meanwhile, the Times revealing Britain will dramatically increase its production of explosives to reduce reliance on the US and France for ammunition. The Guardian splash features findings from a leaked report which found extra costs from Brexit are denying cancer patients life-saving drugs and treatment trials. Meanwhile, onto the Express, which says campaigners in the Supreme Court gender case have received death threats in the wake of the decision to legally define a woman on biological sex. The Mail, meanwhile, reporting on the story too, with the headline, Starmer must break his silence on trans judgment. Moving on to the Daily Telegraph, reporting Labour MPs are set to meet this week to thwart the court's gender ruling. The Prime Minister, it says, has no plans to stop them. And the Financial Times leading with the war in Ukraine as Kiev accuses Russia of breaking its Easter ceasefire. Moving on to the Mirror, a call there from animal rights groups to speed up the ban on trophy hunt imports after a fair in Staffordshire was selling African hunting holidays. And finally, the Daily Star using an image of Daniel Craig as James Bond to report Chinese spies have bugged benches and pubs around Westminster. Let's take you to Westminster because Liberal Democrats criticising the performance of the NHS this morning and long waits for patients in A&E. The Lib Dem spokesperson for hospitals and primary care, Jess Brown-Fuller, joins us now. Appreciate you making time for us on an Easter Monday. Happy Easter to you as well. Just talk to us about what you've been finding. This is regarding the length of time and the number of people who've been waiting on trolleys in A&E departments.
Correct. Thank you, Gareth. Happy Easter to you too. Thank you for having me on. So the Liberal Democrats commissioned a piece of work where we requested FOIs from 141 NHS trusts asking how long people have had trolley wait. So a trolley wait is after you've been through A&E, it has been determined that you should be admitted onto a ward, and you are then on a trolley, most often in a corridor, sometimes in a cupboard, not on a ward in a bay, for over 24 hours. And the figures that have come back, and I must state, this is a drop in the ocean, because of the 141 trusts that we FOI'd, only 54 of those came back. But those 54 that did showed us that just in the last 5 years, the number of trolley waits of over 24 hours has increased 71-fold. So in 2019, you had less than 700 people in an entire year waiting in corridors for over 24 hours after being admitted. In 2024, it was 49,000. And potentially the most harrowing of that is that 70% of those 49,000 people were 65 and over.
And according to the data you've been sharing, some patients experiencing trolley waits of up to 10 days.
Yes, there was one NHS trust that came back and told us that one patient had been waiting for 10 days, and another pensioner had been in a corridor for 6 days. And behind this data, Gareth, there are real people, and there is no dignity to be found waiting in a corridor. There is no privacy to be found. You don't want to be in hospital anyway, and yet to be left in a corridor, in a cupboard, unable to have any privacy, dignity, and security that you are staying there and being made better, is totally unacceptable.
You found this data. You're not the party in power, but you are the third largest party in Parliament. What are you going to do about it?
So we've been calling for two things. We've been calling for a superheads approach. We saw it with Ofsted when you had failing schools, where they put a superhead into a failing school to turn it around. The same can be done for the NHS. We've been calling on the government to do the superhead approach, taking them into NHS trusts that are failing, that are heavily reliant on corridor care, or the NHS trusts that are normalising corridor care by advertising positions for corridor care nurses. And we've also been calling for a very long time for a winter task force to actually winterproof the NHS. For the last 7 years, the government have had to announce emergency funding every winter to tackle the winter crisis. And that's usually around £375,000 a year. What the Liberal Democrats are calling for is for the next 4 years for that money to be ring-fenced, 1.5 billion, so that NHS trusts can plan to spend the money in advance so they can actually have the resilience to cope with the winter crisis, which happens every year. There is no point in announcing money halfway through a crisis that the NHS trusts then don't have time to spend. They need to be able to plan. And so we are calling on the government to introduce this winter task force.
While I have you, a point that's pertinent to hospitals in particular is, of course, the ruling by the Supreme Court last week. Protests over the course of the weekend, calls on Sir Keir to pass comment on that judgment, and potential rumours from within the Labour Party that some members of the party might try and do things to try and thwart or block that ruling. What's the position of the Liberal Democrats?
The Liberal Democrats accept the Supreme Court ruling, and we recognise that there's been too much confusion over what protections the Equality Act actually provides for too long. And there's also lots of fear, confusion within the trans community as well. So the Liberal Democrats are calling for the government to provide further guidance and clarity. That's the most important thing on what the judgment means for people. But we also need to have a good faith conversation with all sides, taking out the toxicity that we have had for so long in this conversation, and move forward to protect women and the trans community.
Do you think we're at that point yet, that the toxicity will be removed when we hear of the talk of death threats? You know, in the ruling from the Supreme Court, the judge said that there was no winners on either side, but it doesn't feel as though that's where society still is yet. It still feels very polarised, very us and them. Do you think that politicians could be doing more to try and tone down the level of debate that's being had currently in the UK?
Absolutely, because this is not a conversation about us and them. It's a conversation about making sure that guidance exists to protect everybody. And that is what the Equality Act should do, and that is what the Equality Act is trying to do. But that's why we're calling on the government to come forward and make that guidance really clear, so that organisations, so that individuals, and so that people that are just trying to live their lives can do so confidently and safely.
Joining us from Chichester, Jess Brown-Fuller from the Liberal Democrats. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Let's bring you up to speed now on the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it's a bank holiday, so I've got to say the words changeable showers and prolonged rain. That's all coming this week, but it should be more settled from Thursday. Mostly mild. Southwestern Britain at the moment, southwestern Scotland, eastern parts of Northern Ireland are all wet. Central England and Ireland have showers. Southwestern Britain and Northern Ireland will see the rain clearing to sunshine and showers this morning. Western Scotland, northwest and central England turning wet. Elsewhere, northeastern Britain looking fine, increasingly cloudy. Ireland and the southeast expect some heavy showers.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
James is here to bring us more of the weekend sport. I got the results of the Formula One wrong at the last hour, so I'm going to ask you, what do you want to talk about, James?
We're going to talk about Formula One, you see. Who did win?
He did win, but hang on a second. I'm pretty sure Charles Leclerc was in pole position at one point during that race. Bear with me whilst you tell us more. I'm going to come back to you.
Right, OK. Well, technically, just to clear it up with everybody, he wasn't in pole position. Pole position is the position for the driver who wins qualifying and qualifies first on the grid. Somebody may be saying that Nigel Mansell won. That's incorrect as well. What a lovely man he is, by the way. I spent time with him at Silverstone, walking around Silverstone, going through a museum there as well. And he's a brilliant, brilliant guy, by the way.
I didn't think this was going to go in this direction, did I?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they're sending me all over the place today. It was Charles Leclerc was ahead at one point, would have been due to pit stops, but Oscar Piastri in the McLaren was leading pretty much the whole way after Max Verstappen went off the track illegally, given a 5-second penalty, and that meant Oscar Piastri was able to win. Only won by 3 seconds, though, so that 5-second penalty made all the difference. Lando Norris, who had a crash in practice, he ended up 4th, started 10th, so he had a good race, but not good enough for him. He's got eyes set on the world title. And as for Lewis Hamilton, he's still struggling in the Ferrari. He was 7th, and he's quite a way off the pace from his teammate Charles Leclerc.
There's not going to be an eighth season win, is there, this year?
I don't think so, but you can never doubt Lewis Hamilton, so you never, ever know. But plenty more on that, but we've also got reaction from yesterday's football. Trent Alexander-Arnold speaks about his own future at Liverpool after his goal against Leicester moves him a step closer to the Premier League title. Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta plays down concerns over an injury to Bukayo Saka ahead of their Champions League semi-final first leg against PSG next week. And in boxing, joy for Ben Whittaker as he beats Liam Cameron after a second-round stoppage in their rematch last night.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure. now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Good morning, you're watching Breakfast on Sky News at 7:30 on a bank holiday Monday morning. Coming up, we'll take you through the day's papers, the headlines there. We'll also...
Yeah, in sport, we'll have details of yesterday's Premier League action. One club close to lifting the Premier League title. One club succumbed to relegation to the Championship.
All begins with an L. But first, our top stories for you this morning. Scammers using AI technology have created deepfake adverts using Sky News journalists to promote illegal casinos masquerading as children's games. The revelations prompting the Gambling Commission and National Crime Agency to call for action. Following a weekend of trans rights protests, there are growing calls on the Prime Minister to set out where he stands on the Supreme Court's gender ruling. Donald Trump says he is hopeful that Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week to end the war in Ukraine. There were renewed strikes on Ukraine overnight after President Putin's Easter truce expired. Ukraine's Air Force says that Russia launched 96 drones and 3 missiles. The Israeli military says its investigation into the killing of 15 aid workers in Gaza has found there were several professional failures, breaches of orders, and a failure to fully report the incident. And Gatwick Airport has been named the worst UK airport for flight delays for a second year in a row as it continues to suffer from air traffic control disruption. We talked lots about the scores. It's time to talk about the people going to go and watch the games.
Yeah, we will do. And Chelsea fans have reacted really furiously to revelations that the club's owner is profiting from ticket resales at huge markups. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has the story.
Feeling priced out and speaking out. Fan anger spreading in the Premier League. At Manchester City, forcing a freeze on the cost of tickets. But they're still calling for change at Tottenham Hotspur. And at Chelsea, demanding action over inflated prices on a ticket exchange website, with links to one of the owners, Todd Bowley.
It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace.
It's the 21st century greed, unfortunately, isn't it?
It doesn't look too good on the Chelsea and their owners, to be fair.
True supporters don't get to see the game anymore. We're full of tourists.
It's 3 years since Mr. Bowley was part of the buyout of Chelsea from Roman Abramovich. The American was already a director and investor in Vivid Seats, the online marketplace selling Stamford Bridge tickets way over face value. For the upcoming match against Liverpool, fans can't buy any regular tickets from Chelsea. But on Vivid Seats, on one day last week, we found tickets the club prices at a maximum £80, being sold from £537 to £2,666. And these can be traders selling them. Vivid told Sky News their policy restricts the sale and marketing of Premier League tickets in the UK. Listings of them could be seen here a week ago. We filmed this outside Chelsea with prices in pounds. After we pressed for comment, those listings were no longer visible here. But Vivid said it was factually incorrect anything changed, insisting validation protocols restrict marketing tickets in the UK. And the company told us Premier League tickets will still be sold overseas. All around Stamford Bridge, fans are presented with these signs telling them not to buy tickets from touts. But the Chelsea Supporters Trust has written to the Premier League to say that all these efforts are undermined by Todd Boehly, and Vivid Seats is even listed on the Premier League's website as an unauthorised ticket reseller. And fans are told to act with extreme caution if dealing with the site. But ticket exchanges enabled these fans to come from abroad.
We got it through a reselling site. Yeah. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to get tickets if you're not a member.
I asked if you queue up like I used to, pay a £5, but no.
And how much have you paid them for the ticket?
Oh, go on. It's about an arm and a leg, half my pension. They're 300 quid, mate.
Secondary ticketing sites are in the sights of MPs with potential legislation.
It's an unregulated market. It's like the Wild West. It needs getting back into control. It just seems completely counterintuitive that there are people deliberately make a killing and fleece loyal fans who've supported these clubs for decades.
He shouldn't be involved in Chelsea and a reselling website. It's unethical.
Vivid Seats told Sky News it respectfully adheres to the laws that are in place in the United Kingdom and is not in violation of any regulations around EPL tickets, adding, "It is important to note that Vivid Seats does not set the base price for tickets sold on its marketplace or receive any revenue from that base price. Only the seller sets and receives the base ticket price." The Chelsea Supporters Trust complains Todd Boehly has not engaged with their request to discuss the issue. So they're hoping the Premier League investigates and intervenes. Rob Harris, Sky News, Stamford Bridge.
It's the constant tricky thing with football, hey? Prices.
And that story is quite fascinating. It's a very bad look for the Chelsea owners and chairman Todd Boehly. The fact he's an investor in Vivid Seats. They're selling inflated ticket prices to an international audience. Now, we are seeing more and more in the Premier League, international audiences coming over, going to the game as almost like a tourist attraction. Nothing wrong with that. I think we were talking before, and I was saying in America, often Brits go over there to watch NFL, NBA, to experience that sport. So there's no reason why we shouldn't shut that off to an international market. The problem is the inflated prices, and what that's doing is pushing the everyday football fans away from going to see their club, something they want to do, whether that's with their family or with friends of theirs that they do for years and years. But the fact that an owner and a club chairman of one of the football clubs, in this instance Chelsea, is a shareholder in this ticket selling site just doesn't feel right, feels unethical. And the fact that the Chelsea fans are talking up about this, they want an investigation themselves because they feel like their opportunity to go and see their teams play and the cost it has for them to go and see them play is so high now, it's becoming impossible to go and do that. So it just doesn't sit right, this story. I think there will be an investigation. I'm intrigued to see where it gets to, actually.
We're going to bring you the sport in a few moments, James, but I just want to take you to Tel Aviv. These are the latest images coming to us here at Sky News. The Israeli Prime Minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu, in court on corruption charges, previously rejecting the charges as, I quote, absurd. They reference bribery, fraud, breach of trust, and they have been long-running charges that have dogged him in recent years. But we're seeing these latest images coming to us from Tel Aviv, following charges that began back all the way back to 2019 now, 3 separate cases of corruption, and Benjamin Netanyahu in court describing previously those charges as absurd. We'll bring you more details on today's proceedings as we get them. But let's bring James back in for the sport.
Yes, more sports and good morning to you all. Now, Liverpool are now just 1 win away from securing the Premier League title after beating Leicester 1-0. Trent Alexander-Arnold scored the only goal of the game in the last 15 minutes. Liverpool can seal the title on Sunday with a win at home to Tottenham Hotspur, or if Arsenal lose at home to Crystal Palace on Wednesday. Alexander-Arnold, who has been strongly linked with a move to Real Madrid in the summer, didn't give much away when asked about his future at Liverpool.
I've said all season, I'm not going to speak on my situation. I'm not going to go into details, but these days like today are always special. Scoring goals, playing, winning games, being close to winning titles as well, being in title races. The special moments that will live with me forever, and I'm glad to be a part of them.
Yeah, he enjoyed the celebration. Leicester fans less so. The defeat means Leicester are relegated. They have also broken an unwanted record by becoming the first team in top flight history to go 9 consecutive home games without scoring. Arsenal ensured Liverpool have to wait a little longer to be crowned champions after they beat Ipswich 4-0. After Leandro Trossard, opened scoring, Gabriel Martinelli made it 2-0 after 28 minutes with his 50th goal for Arsenal. Leif Davis was sent off for a challenge on Bukayo Saka before Arsenal went 3-up. Trossard scoring his second of the game. Substitute Ethan Nwaneri then wrapped up a 4-0 win 2 minutes from time. There were concerns, however, for Saka after he was taken off following the tackle. Manager Mikel Arteta said he's confident it's nothing serious and the winger will be fine to face PSG in the Champions League semi-final leg a week on Tuesday.
I didn't see the tackle, it was quite fast, so I didn't see it was very far from the bench. But yeah, after watching it, I think it's a good decision for the referee, and thankfully, yeah, he's in a bit of pain, but it doesn't look anything too serious.
That was semi-final first leg. Now, after their Europa League heroics, it was another disappointing day in the Premier League for Manchester United, who lost at home to Wolves. The result leaves Ruben Amorim's side 14th in the Premier League with 5 games to go. Pablo Sarabia's great free kick here, the only goal of the game to make it 5 wins from 5 for Wolves and confirm their Premier League status for another season. For Manchester United, though, they have now lost 15 games this season. That's their worst performance for 35 years. There was late drama in West London where Pedro Neto scored in the 3rd minute of stoppage time to give Chelsea a 2-1 win over Fulham. Alex Iwobi gave Fulham the lead before substitute Tariq George equalised with his first Chelsea goal before this winner from Neto late on. The win keeps Chelsea on course for next season's Champions League as they move above Nottingham Forest into 5th. Formula One and McLaren driver Oscar Piastri won the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix to move to the top of the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen finished second after he started on pole ahead of Piastri, but the world champion was given a 5-second penalty for going off the track at the first corner, as you could see there. The safety car was also called out in the opening lap following this collision between Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly. Piastri won by nearly 3 seconds. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc was 3rd, while Britain's Lando Norris was 4th. After starting from 10th on the grid. It wasn't a great day for Lewis Hamilton, who finished in 7th. The teams now head to the United States for the Miami Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. Celtic will play Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final next month after they cruised to a 5-0 victory over St Johnstone in the semi-final. Celtic captain Callum McGregor was among the goal scorers at Hampden Park, and Brendan Rodgers' side remain on course for a domestic treble. It would be the club's 9th treble and their 6th in the last 9 seasons. In the Women's Champions League, Chelsea were beaten 4-1 by holders Barcelona in the first leg of their semi-final. Claudia Pina scored twice for Barcelona in the win, and it's just the second time Chelsea have been beaten this season and means they have it all to do in the return leg at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. Staying in Spain, and Real Madrid have moved to within 4 points of La Liga leaders Barcelona after a 1-0 win over Athletic Club. Federico Valverde scored a stunning 93rd minute winner to secure all 3 points for Carlo Ancelotti's side. It's turning into a close title race with Real just 4 points behind Barcelona with 6 games to go. Boxing, and Ben Whittaker put his career back on track after he beat Liam Cameron in their highly anticipated rematch last night. It took Whittaker just 2 rounds to stop Cameron and secure victory in their light heavyweight rematch in Birmingham. It follows last year's controversial draw, which ended in bizarre circumstances when both men fell over the ropes and Whittaker was unable to continue due to injury. To golf, and Justin Thomas beat fellow American Andrew Novak and win a playoff to win the RBC Heritage and claim his first win on the PGA Tour for 3 years. Thomas produced this 20-foot birdie putt to win the playoff and his 16th PGA Tour title. Up next for the PGA Tour is the Zurich Classic of New Orleans with Masters champion Rory McIlroy back in action. That's on Thursday, live on Sky Sports Golf. And let's have a look at the back pages, and the eye leads on the ups and downs of the Premier League as Leicester are relegated, but Liverpool move a step closer to the title. Tar very much. Headlines on the Daily Star as Liverpool defender Trent Alexander-Arnold remained very coy on his future at the club despite his winning goal. While the Times reports on the shock of Manchester City midfielder Kevin De Bruyne, who was not offered a new deal at the club, which he described as a pure business decision. Monday Night Football sees Tottenham Hotspur face Nottingham Forest, and you can see that live on Sky Sports this evening. And we're back with more sport in the next hour.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning, we'll discuss the stories making the news today with Westminster editor of The Lead, Zoe Grunwald, and journalist Matt Stanley. Coming up next.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Time to take a look through the papers, joined by Zoe Grunwald, Westminster editor of The Lead, journalist Matt Stadlin as well. Good to have you both with us on a bank holiday Monday.
There was some confusion in the last hour about the chocolate eggs that I chose.
Right, why?
Well, some of your colleagues weren't clear as to exactly which eggs I was referring to by the chocolate eggs with the gooey chocolate inside. Definitely not Cadbury cream eggs. Those Lindt eggs with the little sort of red wrappings.
The name's going to escape me. It's like Lindor in my left ear. There we are.
Oh, Lindor. Is it not Lindt then? It's Lindor, is it? Yeah.
Lindor by Lindt, I think. There we are. Other egg brands are available. David, the director, you really have helped. Thank you so much. It appears as I'm just talking to myself now on television. But let's talk about what's happening in the papers. We're going to get on to all sorts, including kind of second jobs in Parliament in a few moments' time. But actually, 2 front pages that are putting pressure on more Downing Street than Parliament is both the Mail and the Telegraph, and kind of talks about what's going on in the Labour Party following the Supreme Court judgment.
Yeah, well, this was a landmark judgment, wasn't it? And I think it's important that people pay proper attention to it and don't just, if it doesn't suit their narrative, slam the judges, because all sides in political conversations sometimes do that, and you've got to be consistent. However, there are obviously big implications that may flow from it, and this is now the fallout from it. How do we interpret that Supreme Court judgment? How will Number 10 respond? They've welcomed it so far. The front page of the Mail is saying that Starmer needs actually to come out and speak in his own voice about it. And there have been these WhatsApp messages that have been the subject of some stories in the last couple of days involving a couple of Labour ministers who seem on the face of it to be quite concerned about the judgment and its implications for trans people. And there will be lots of trans people around the country who will be very concerned about what this means for them, because the judgment basically said that the Equality Act of 2010, when it talks about women or sex, it's talking about biology. Yeah. In other words, a woman is someone who is biologically female. How that now is interpreted in the way we all live our daily lives seems to be, to some extent at least, up for grabs, even though one side is saying it was emphatically clear. And there are question marks now about the Equality and Human Rights Commission, how they will now issue guidance about what this judgment means. For example, if you are a trans person, what spaces are you or are you not entitled to use? And this is a fundamental question for, yes, a tiny minority of people, but nonetheless a fundamental question for our fellow human beings. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's summed up perfectly. And I think some of the way that this, conversation between Labour ministers has been portrayed by these papers, they're calling them plotters, saying they're going to try and thwart the court judgment. Actually, what it sounds like is you have a handful of ministers who are concerned about where this leaves trans people and want to make sure they're speaking to the relevant minister who's in charge of equalities. That is an extremely reasonable reaction for government ministers, based on this landmark ruling, to be concerned about what this means in practice for trans people. And I think the coverage actually is quite hysterical. I think it's quite unfair to describe these ministers who are just doing their job, making sure that they understand the guidance clearly. And of course, this is a social issue. Social issues in politics are often left by politicians to be matters of conscience, and there is often an understanding within parties that within those parties politicians will feel different ways. So I think the idea that Starmer should come out and, there's in one of these articles it suggests, there's no suggestion that he'll punish these ministers for having concerns. I mean, that would be an extraordinary thing for him to do. And I think, wanting Starmer to make a statement on this himself, we have to digest this, we have to understand the guidance, and I think it's absolutely fair enough that ministers would have concerns on both sides of the judgment and want to know what it means for trans people and women. And
there are, as we know, there are a competing set of rights here. As a man, of course I've got to listen, and we all should listen to those women, and it's not all women, but those women who have very serious concerns about trans women being able to use some of their spaces. But that doesn't mean that we then wash our hands of trans people who also have rights and who also need to go to the loo or use changing rooms. If you, for example, have transitioned, it doesn't mean that you've changed your sex, but if you have transitioned, you've undergone surgery, and you look and feel and are, to almost all intents and purposes, a woman, where are you supposed to get changed or go to the loo? And these questions aren't going to go away. And the government, I think, the politics of this, there are lots of politics of it, but Starmer does, I imagine, not want to sort of be seen to be too woke, to use that dreadful word, or caving to the trans lobby, so-called. And he doesn't want to give ground to Kemi Badenoch, he doesn't want to give ground to Nigel Farage. But he also is our Prime Minister, and there is also a very vulnerable minority of people in this country who need to be protected, right?
Yeah, and if you're going to be a government for all, then you have the discussions about how you govern and look after all, and they will hopefully be acutely aware of the very sad reality of the level of mental health challenges and suicide amongst the trans community, often born out of what happens in the media, in the press, on social media, and the stigma and hatred and vitriol that's directed in many of those individuals.
It should be possible to have this conversation, I hope and think, without the toxicity. You can be a woman or indeed a man who is concerned for single-sex spaces without stigmatising and hating on people who have undergone the sort of procedures that I've just mentioned. deliberately calls someone a man who has struggled with their identity or is very clear about their identity, that although they were born a man and are still biologically male, they want to be a woman, feel that they are a woman. In individual cases, to point to that person and say, you're a bloke, you don't need to do that in order to hold on to the realities of biological sex.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. It's a level of cruelty, and I think when you see headlines like that, where they're almost trying to create, you know, an image of people who are caring about trans rights or worried about this ruling as somehow plotting or being, you know, in some ways trying to thwart what the public good is. I think it's just a really unhelpful narrative that worsens this divide and this conflict between the trans community and, you know...
And their democratically elected politicians.
Yes, yes. And the For You page of a certain social media platform does not help in some of this at all. I'm afraid we're going to have to save some more to the next hour. We've done too much, but bless you both. Stay with us. Stay with us as well here on Sky News. We'll bring you the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Changeable this week. Showers, prolonged rain. It should become more settled from Thursday, though. Mostly mild this morning. Southwestern Britain, southwestern Scotland, eastern parts of Northern Ireland, all wet. Central England and Ireland have some showers for their part. Southwestern Britain and Northern Ireland seeing rain clearing to sunshine and showers through the morning. Western Scotland and northwest and central England turning wet for their part. Elsewhere, northeastern Britain looks fine, increasingly cloudy. Ireland and the southeast do expect some heavy showers. Central parts a little cooler.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Just a reminder, there is plenty more to come here on Breakfast on Sky News. Plenty more as well on the app and the website. I'm going to be talking to you about those scams that are taking news presenters, people like me, and trying to use them to lure people into false promises.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. On today's show, how scammers are using AI to generate fake adverts using journalists from national news organisations, including Sky News.
And in sport, Trent Alexander-Arnold scored the winner for Liverpool to leave them on the brink of a record-equalling 20th league title.
It's almost there. It's also Monday, the 21st of April.
Important news for all iPhone owners.
What you're seeing is not real. Sky News reveals thousands of deepfake adverts designed to scam the public into betting with illegal casinos. Also ahead, blasts shake Ukrainian cities after President Putin's Easter truce expires. Growing calls on the Prime Minister to set out where he stands on the Supreme Court's gender ruling after a weekend of protests. Gatwick is the UK's worst airport for flight delays, according to the Civil Aviation Authority.
And there's action from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as Oscar Piastri replaces his McLaren teammate Lando Norris at the top of the Drivers' Championship.
Very good morning to you. Gareth Barlow with you on Sky News Breakfast. What happens when we can't believe our own eyes? Scammers using AI technology have created deepfake adverts using Sky News journalists to promote illegal casinos, masquerading, though, as children's games. The revelation has led to calls for action from the Gambling Commission and the National Crime Agency. In a moment, we'll speak to our science and technology reporter, Mickey Carroll, who's one of the journalists using the scam. But first, here's her report.
Important news for all iPhone owners. Apple CEO Tim Cook has unveiled an app that will earn money for anyone who owns an iPhone.
Late last year, Sky News presenter Matt Barbette and I realised that we'd been deepfaked. Scammers had used our faces to advertise a gaming app that promised players huge sums of money.
My winnings were £500,000. Yesterday, I already bought the car I dreamed of.
But what seemed like one fairly shoddy deepfake revealed a complex scam operation with fraudsters using thousands of videos of deepfake journalists to promote illegal apps.
Apple has decided to reward all its iPhone users with money.
The majority of the apps were being hosted on Apple's App Store. They initially looked like children's games featuring cartoons and lively descriptions, and many had a 4+ age rating. But once installed, app after app opened up to illegal, unlicensed casinos. The Gambling Commission told us that they were very concerned about what we'd found.
If you're gambling on an illegal casino, there's no protection for you. Your financial data could be harvested, stolen and misused elsewhere. Your personal data, there are no protections in place for you at all. We've been in touch with Apple already to understand what safeguards they've got in place.
Apple told us that the casinos had often been hidden within the code of legitimate-looking games. When Apple's developers vetted the apps, they couldn't see the casinos. But as soon as those apps were published, the simple childlike games disappeared and were replaced with illegal slots, roulettes and more. Cybersecurity experts even told us that the original games that Apple saw were likely to be AI generated to speed up the process for scammers. To make the scam even more believable, the criminals used the names of real companies on the App Store.
A marketing company in Wales, a young people's charity in New York, a company based here in Soho that helps people pay the correct utility bills. They were all named as the owners of these apps, which potentially reassured Apple that the apps were legitimate. But the companies had no idea that their names were being used.
First of all, it's a real sense of panic. I think it's really important to us that our customers trust us. This doesn't breed trust. This looks like we're doing something different. This looks like we're using our name and our brand to do something totally different, which we're not.
Apple quickly removed the apps we flagged to them, and the Gambling Commission took action to block the casinos as well. But while criminals are able to wield powerful tools like generative AI, the onus falls on consumers to stay alert to the risks posed by scammers.
Mickey's here for more of this. We're going to have plenty more of this at hour as well. But this is big business now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And while this was a scam that kind of featured us and therefore we noticed it pretty quickly, the problem with these things is AI is making them kind of on this huge scale much more of a problem. So these deepfakes are being pumped out on this massive scale. We found 11,000 videos of deep-faked people, most of them journalists from around the world. We found dozens of apps, which experts told us were created using AI to kind of make them easier to create and put through the App Store. So as AI becomes more accessible for not just people like us, but also scammers who want to use it against us, these scams are going to become more realistic, more believable, but also much more widespread. So that's a problem that the National Crime Agency and the Gambling Commission both want something done about.
We're going to chat about this further later in the programme. For the moment, though, Mickey, thank you so much. Mari's also standing by in Westminster. Mari, you've not been deep-faked, have you?
I have not, thank goodness, Gareth, no. I have never been deep-faked, but it is really concerning and really quite frightening how realistic those videos are. So, yeah, touch wood, so far so good.
I was saying to you last hour, I've been done twice now, once when I worked at a previous broadcast and a version here at Sky. They always make me sound more camp, firstly. And then secondly, the other day I was made aware of an account that uses all of my content on the Chinese version of TikTok. And I go by the name of Ashton, and I don't think this is the face of an Ashton, personally. It's giving a far more edgy version of me than really exists in real life.
I think I can see you as an Ashton, Gareth. I could see that. And you know, a little skin fade, maybe an earring. We can make you into an
eyebrow,
Ashton.
just kind of couple cuts in the eyebrow. It's all there. But this is the reality, though. That it is people. We can kind of be slightly wryly smiling about it, but the reality is that people are having their image stolen, they are having their money stolen, and it's really serious. It's something that governments and politicians so far struggling really to be able to regulate the internet as well. That's the other challenge.
Yeah, that's a massive challenge, partly because often when it comes to internet and AI, often it's faster than government legislation. Legislation is slow. It's a slow machine. It's slow for a reason, for a very good reason. Lots of scrutiny and lots of time pouring over making sure that laws are, correct, watertight, whatever else. But nonetheless, it often means that government is permanently on the back foot. And I think when you talk about politics as well, there's always a massive concern around deepfakes when they could potentially be, mimicking politicians. Do you remember back, it was about 2 years ago, Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and there was a deepfake audio of Keir Starmer criticising Liverpool, saying all these horrible things about Liverpool while he was in Liverpool, and it wasn't true. It was a deep fake, but it did the rounds and so many people believed it, and it really coloured people's view of Keir Starmer. Those kinds of things are so dangerous.
Certainly are. They certainly are indeed. Lots of talk also in the papers this morning on Bank Holiday Monday regarding kind of narratives within the Labour Party regarding the Supreme Court judgment. Just tell us more about that while you're with us.
Yes, exactly, Gareth. So this row is kind of erupting in the Labour Party. As much as government sources might like to try and downplay it, there does actually really appear to be quite a significant amount of tension and frustration and anger in the Labour Party around the Supreme Court ruling. On both sides of the debate. Now, this comes because of the Mail on Sunday published leaked WhatsApp messages, alleged leaked WhatsApp messages from ministers and MPs around the Supreme Court ruling and their concerns around that and whether it was appropriate to, for instance, ban trans women from competing in women's sports and those kinds of things. However, what's really interesting is the Daily Mail and the Telegraph are basically saying it's time for the Prime Minister to speak up. They are essentially accusing him of being silent on the issue. Obviously, it's important to remember that he has been away on holiday with his family. It's the Easter recess for Parliament, but Parliament does come back tomorrow. And what they're saying is they want to hear from the Prime Minister tomorrow, specifically rather than just a government spokesperson or a government quote or a more junior minister on the morning round, for instance. So it'll be interesting to see whether they do decide to go for that. But what's also really interesting is I've been speaking to a Labour MP this morning who is clearly frustrated with the rhetoric in those WhatsApp messages criticising the Supreme Court and the Equality and Rights Commission chairwoman for some of her comments on trans men not being allowed to go into female-only spaces, for instance. Let me just read you some of what this Labour MP said to me. So this is Tonia Antoniazzi. She's a Labour MP. She's worked on some of this stuff for a long time in Parliament. She says, the Equality Act has been a landmark piece of legislation which has been allowed under the previous government to be misinterpreted. The power and money behind lobbying groups, which as a politician I've seen firsthand has influenced policy. We see it in our trade unions, across our public services, and especially in devolved governments. She goes on to talk about how the Supreme Court judgment was clarifying the definition of a woman, and that it was assuring that everybody had equal rights under the law. And then she says, self-identification has never been law. It's not Labour policy. People need to read the judgment, and government now needs to assess the impact of the decision. And then she goes on to talk about the damage that we saw of statues you see on your screen there, the defacing of statues, one of which was obviously Millicent Fawcett, a very prominent feminist and suffragette. And she was saying here, the damage to statues, the threatening signs calling to hang TERFs. TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. That's what some kind of sections of the trans lobby call the likes of, for instance, J.K. Rowling and others with similar views. And also to decapitate them, she says. Those scenes witnessed in Parliament must not be tolerated. The government has commitment to reduce violence against women and girls by half this Parliament. I'll listen to this bit. She says, until this misogyny towards women is addressed and the Supreme Court judgment implemented across all policy areas properly, then I have grave concerns that we will fail to address this. So she is making a direct link between what she feels is the government's pledge, manifesto pledge, to reduce and halve violence against women and girls, and the ability not to discipline and really kind of crack down on some of the protests and vandalism and graffiti and signs that we saw yesterday in Westminster. So for all those who were watching this and thinking it was something that was going to blow over, Parliament would come back and we'd all get on with talking about other things like, you know, tariffs, for instance, it doesn't feel like that. Just that one quote from that Labour MP there, I think demonstrates there is a lot of frustration and anger about perhaps the way the government has handled this, and therefore obviously also the process that we saw yesterday.
Mari in Westminster, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories on a bank holiday Monday morning. President Putin's Easter truce with Ukraine has expired. Ukraine's Air Force say Russia launched 96 drones and 3 missiles across the country. The US President Donald Trump says, though, he is hoping a peace deal could be announced this week. He posted on Truth Social, writing, hopefully Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do big business with the US, which is thriving, and make a fortune. Meanwhile, President Trump is facing renewed calls to sack his Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth. The New York Times has reported he shared details of an attack on Yemen last month on a second group chat that included his wife and brother. These are the same strikes that were leaked to a journalist who was accidentally included in discussions about plans for the operation. Well, in Yemen, Houthi rebels report the US airstrikes on Sunday killed at least 12 people. The Trump administration says the strikes are part of a campaign to prevent Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, an Israeli military investigation has found there were several professional failures after they killed 15 Palestinian aid workers in Gaza last month. A Sky News investigation has revealed how the attack unfolded, contradicting the IDF's official account of the killings. Nicole Johnston has the story.
Professional failure, a series of operational mistakes. These are the findings of the Israeli military's investigation into its attack on a medical convoy in Gaza that killed 15 Palestinian aid workers. Israeli troops buried their bodies and the crushed vehicles in the sand. The military, under pressure to explain its actions, has released a statement. It says, the deputy commander failed to identify the fire truck and ambulances, blaming it on poor night visibility. He opened fire. The rest of the battalion followed. He has now been dismissed. The statement also said removing the bodies was reasonable under the circumstances, but the decision to crush the vehicles was wrong, and there was no attempt to conceal the event. At the heart of the matter is the identities of those killed. Israel again claimed that 6 were members of Hamas, but it has provided no evidence of this.
First of all, as the IDF said, and we've been gathering the evidence around this from the very beginning and taking our time to do so, is that 5 or possibly 6 members of the people that were in that ambulance have links to Hamas.
Sky News' own investigation didn't find any proof the medics were associated with Hamas. It was the video found on the phone of one of the medics killed that provided the first real evidence of what happened. It proved the convoy did have its lights on, and medics were wearing high-vis vests, contradicting an earlier statement by the military. Israel's story has changed since the bodies were recovered, and calls for an independent investigation are growing.
There remains evidence that it may well be a war crime, and it's something that should be investigated as a possible war crime, and it should be investigated by the International Criminal Court, which is the only international court capable of conducting a criminal investigation into something like this. The report that's been produced may engender in some people the suspicion that it's a whitewash, and what Israel needs to do right now is to take steps to avoid that inference becoming a conclusion.
In a briefing to journalists, the Israeli military said an hour before the convoy attack, it fired on a vehicle it thought was Hamas. It later discovered it wasn't. This investigation is no consolation for the families of the medics. The convoy had gone out, looking for a missing ambulance and its crew. By the end of the night, they too had all disappeared and never made it home. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Just a reminder, if you scan the QR code on your screen, you can watch 2 hours of terror, the Sky News investigation into how Israel's deadly attack on the aid workers unfolded. Meanwhile, today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has appeared in court to testify in his long-running trial on corruption charges. Prosecutors allege that Mr. Netanyahu exchanged regulatory favours with media owners in Israel, seeking positive press coverage and accepted pricey gifts. He strongly denies any wrongdoing. Time to bring up to speed on some of the day's other stories now. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will travel to Washington today to meet with economic leaders at the International Monetary Fund conference. Discussions expected to focus on the impact of US tariffs on the world economy. A murder investigation is underway after a woman was found stabbed to death in Enfield in North London. The 45-year-old victim pronounced dead at the scene after police were called at around 7 p.m. on Saturday. The family of a student who was murdered in South London 10 years ago have launched an appeal for help. 21-year-old Olaraji was gunned down and stabbed as he cycled home at night through Peckham. Crime Stoppers are offering a £20,000 reward for information leading to a conviction. Scottish Water staff will stage a 2-day walkout on Tuesday and Wednesday in a dispute over pay. Unison, which represents over 1,000 staff, says emergency repairs and water quality checks will not be carried out during the strike. Scottish Water says there are contingency plans in place to maintain a normal service. And the Prince and Princess of Wales will spend their 14th wedding anniversary in Scotland celebrating rural communities. William and Kate spending 2 days on the Isle of Mull, meeting farmers, craftspeople and local residents. Now then, Gatwick has been named the UK's worst airport for delayed flights for the second year in a row. Departures were on average more than 23 minutes behind schedule in 2024, according to data from the Civil Aviation Authority. Sati Chowdhury here for more on this. And it's at the top, they're only just the worst, aren't they? It's quite a close grouping.
Exactly, yeah. And this comes a month after there were warnings that there will be further disruptions at airports, including at Gatwick, because of air traffic control issues, which, of course, we saw in 2024 affect Gatwick Airport, amongst other European airports. It is the country's second busiest airport, so I think we have to put some of that into context. But we can have a look at some of these airports now. So departures from Gatwick Airport were on average more than 23 minutes behind schedule last year, and that is according to analysis from data from the Civil Aviation Authority. Flights from Birmingham Airport had the second worst record last year, with an average delay of more than 21 minutes. And in third place was Manchester Airport with a 20-minute average delay. We can compare that to Belfast City, which is the best performing in terms of punctuality. Second year in a row, a typical delay per flight of less than 12 minutes, 11 minutes and 36 seconds to be precise. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, 23 minutes, but it does create havoc for passengers who are travelling. It can lead to delays on transit passengers on ongoing flights. And also, air traffic control issues are considered extraordinary circumstances, meaning affected passengers don't always get compensation.
So that's the detail of the issues. What's Gatwick got to say for itself?
Gatwick Airport sort of blames the air traffic control issues, saying that they continue to affect the airport. It says, together with our airlines, we've put in place a robust plan to improve on-time performance further in 2025. Gatwick is the world's most efficient single runway airport, with flights departing or arriving every 55 seconds. And they have made some improvements. The previous year, the delays were on average 27 minutes. And this could be due to lots of different schemes that they've put in place, including separating aircraft that are coming in, but also they've got a now remote control system to bring those jet bridges onto aircraft. So lots of improvement there, but it all comes, as I say, with a warning that this year we could see further disruptions.
Sadly, appreciate the update. Thank you so much. Let's bring you up to speed on one of our top stories this morning. President Putin's Easter truce with Ukraine has expired. Ukraine's Air Force say Russia launched 96 drones and 3 missiles across the country, all while the US President Donald Trump hopes to announce a peace deal this week. Let's join the former UK Defence Attaché to Moscow and Kiev, John Foreman. John, a 30-hour ceasefire was announced and both sides blame the other for breaking it repeatedly. Is there any glimmer of hope amongst all of this maelstrom of bad news that continues from Ukraine?
Well, good morning, Gareth. I think the Foreign Office are quite right to call it a stunt by Putin. Putin lies about everything. He lied about the invasion, he lies about poisonings, and he's broken every truce in the last 10 years since they annexed Crimea. So I wasn't surprised the 30-hour ceasefire broke down. There was some optimism that it might become the sort of first opening of the door towards a sort of 30-day ceasefire. That said, Americans, leaders, the French, the British, the Germans are back in London this week to discuss a ceasefire. So I suppose the mood music from last week was quite positive. The Ukrainians went home to discuss what was on the table. They'll come back this week and we'll see. I think I saw Trump's hopes for a ceasefire, but hope springs eternal, but there has to be backed up with actual movement, I think, now.
Do the Americans have what it takes in the senior leadership? And I say that because a lot of the people making decisions from the American perspective are billionaire real estate moguls. And on the opposite side of the table are people like Vladimir Putin, Sergei Lavrov, who have been in position on international stages for decades now. And they are very wily when it comes to negotiating. Can the US, can the White House administration of Donald Trump really bring to the table a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? I think that Steve Witkoff in particular has been marked out by his credulous nature, that he seems to repeat Russian talking points. He seems to bear the imprint of the last person who sat on him. So when he's in Moscow, he says one thing, he comes back, he says something else when he's in London. I think early on in the process, they opened the sort of negotiations without a clear plan, what they wanted to achieve. And we've seen different statements come from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, from Kellogg, General Kellogg, the previous envoy, now Witkoff. I do think, though, that there are different constituencies in the American system who don't want another Munich, who don't want to sign up to a formal, handing over these Ukrainian territories and Crimea permanently to the Russia. They see the damage of that to American reputation going forward. On the other hand, I think you see Trump's intemperate, impatient and cynical nature. He'd be quite happy to sign the thing off. He signed a deal with the Taliban to abandon Afghanistan, which then Joe Biden implemented. I don't think he's particularly interested in Ukraine. I think he wants to focus on America first, American only. And I think we're getting to that stage now. 100 days is on at the end of April. The time is, the proof is in the pudding. That will always be the time when we actually see whether this is actually possible to pull off.
What would your advice be to Volodymyr Zelensky in the middle of this? Because on one side, he's got someone who says lies all the time. And then on the other side, you've got someone, as you've described, who has a hot head, who effectively will get bored at some point.
Well, I think President Zelensky is a democratically elected president of the people of Ukraine. And he's got to think about the survival of his country as a free, democratic, independent, sovereign state. I can't see any Ukrainian president or any persuasion willing to sign up to a permanent handing over of the occupied territories in Crimea, to disarm and to permanently turn itself away from European Union, NATO. So I think at this stage, I would advise him to stay the course, to explain clearly the disadvantages to America of any surrender of Ukraine to the Russians. I'd advise him to maintain calm despite the provocations. I'd also advise him to sign the deal on critical minerals with the Americans, because I think that would show willingness from the Ukrainian side towards Americans that they're serious about peace.
From the Russian perspective, is there any point when it is in Moscow's favour and interest to agree to a ceasefire, to agree to actually meaningful dialogue and actions with regards to peace?
Well, I think Russia budged a little bit, that they actually decided to actually talk to the Americans back in Saudi Arabia in February and March. That wasn't the position they had last year. That said, they came up with some objections to the unconditional ceasefire. Russia was never going to sign an unconditional ceasefire. Russia was going to have conditions. And I think actually some of those conditions were doable. But since then, it's all gone rather quiet. Whether Putin's serious about peace is unknown. I mean, I think, again, there's a constituency in Russia would like to sign the deal now, to move on, get the economy back to stable order. They've got Ukraine. They would have got Ukraine out of NATO. They would have got to keep some of these territories. They reset with America, and they can undermine Ukraine for the next sort of 20, 30 years without going to war. And I think there's another sort of quite nationalistic community which advising Putin to carry on, to keep pressing forward and trying to get as much possible from Ukraine and from the Americans. And Putin doesn't like to make a deal, make decisions, sorry. I think he likes to put decisions off. And we don't actually know his own heart. And we're seeing conflicting messages coming out from the Kremlin too. So I think, as I said, this is going to be an important period in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll actually see Putin to put his money where his mouth is, to come up and say, yes, is he serious or not? Then the Americans have to decide what to do.
We'll watch the developments closely. For the moment, though, John Foreman, former UK Defence Attaché to both Moscow and Kiev. Appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth.
Just a reminder, plenty more stories on the Sky News website and the Sky News app. And we've also got the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Changeable this week, showers, prolonged rain to come. It should be more settled, though, from Thursday. Mostly mild at the moment. Southwestern Britain, southern western Scotland and eastern parts of Northern Ireland are wet. Central England and Ireland have showers. Southwestern Britain and Northern Ireland seeing rain clearing to sunshine and showers this morning. Western Scotland and northwest and central England turning wet. Elsewhere, northeastern Britain looking fine, increasingly cloudy. Ireland and the southeast expect heavy showers.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
James is here to talk about the sport.
Ashton, good to see you. I'm sorry, Gareth, I was getting confused with what you said earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, look, plenty to come on the sport today. We'll go through an interesting occasion yesterday between two Premier League sides. One looking to lift the Premier League trophy. The other was looking to battle against relegation. Well, the champagne remains on ice just for now for Liverpool, but I'll explain why the Premier League title could be confirmed before they next play. Arsenal prolonged the title race with victory at Ipswich, but has it come at a cost? Next, an update from manager Mikel Arteta on an injury to Bukayo Saka. And delight for Justin Thomas as he produced a monster putt to win on the PGA Tour for the first time in 3 years.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister.
My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Good morning. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Gareth Barlow with you on Sky News. Coming up, we'll take you through the morning's papers, the headlines there.
And in the sport, there's a new leader at the top of the Formula One World Championship. It's no longer Lando Norris. It's now Oscar Piastri.
It certainly is. We've also got the day's top stories for you this morning. Scammers using AI technology have created deepfake adverts using Sky News journalists to promote illegal casinos masquerading as children's games. Revelations have prompted the Gambling Commission and National Crime Agency to call for action. Following a weekend of trans rights protests, there are growing calls on the Prime Minister to set out where he stands on the Supreme Court's gender ruling. Donald Trump says he's hopeful that Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week to end the war in Ukraine. Renewed strikes on Ukraine overnight after President Putin's Easter truce expired. Ukraine's Air Force saying Russia launched 96 drones and 3 missiles. The Israeli military says its investigation into the killing of 15 aid workers in Gaza found there were several professional failures, breaches of orders, and a failure to fully report the incident. And Gatwick Airport's been named the worst UK airport for flight delays for a second year in a row as it continues to suffer from air traffic control disruption. Let's stay with our main story. And scammers using AI technology have created deepfake adverts using Sky News journalists to promote illegal casinos masquerading as children's games. Mickey is here for more on this, our technology and science reporter. Before that, though, let's just show you this short grab.
Important news for all iPhone owners. Apple CEO Tim Cook has unveiled an app that will earn money for anyone who owns an iPhone.
Oh, it's very simple. I downloaded the app and started playing. I simply deposited £5, got a £450 bonus. My winnings were £500,000. Yesterday, I already bought the car I dreamed of.
That is you. That's not you. And you uncovered a trove of videos like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt sent me an email in December saying we've been deepfaked, and I had a clip to the video you've just shown. And we thought, if we're going to do a story on this, it'll be maybe a short piece about, you know, journalists being deepfaked and the impact that can have on trust of journalists. When we pulled the thread, what we found was 11,000 videos of journalists and other public figures, but mainly journalists, being hosted on Meta's ad library. And they were kind of being uploaded and then taken down very quickly so that Meta couldn't catch them, but just tens of thousands of these videos. When we then followed those videos further, we found that they were advertising illegal casinos that were hidden within the App Store masquerading as children's games that were often being advertised for children as young as 4 years old. So it's turned what started off as this could have been quite simple story about deepfakes has turned into revealing this international scam operation with kind of victims at every turn.
And do we have any idea where these scams are originating from?
So we know what we found while we've been researching is possible links to an organised crime group in Russia. And when we've looked into them, there is a history of illegal gambling there. So that's kind of something that we're looking into. But the Gambling Commission, when I kind of posed that to them and said, we've found links to organised crime, Andrew Rhodes, the CEO, said, well, yeah, we find links to organised crime with illegal casinos all the time. So they were actually not so shocked by that. So this is kind of a known thing that mafias, that we know this is operating as a mafia, and organised crime groups are using these illegal casinos to fund their illegal activity.
So you've got 11,000 of these videos. It's a scale that the social media companies can't say they didn't realise was happening because it's just so big. You've got the National Crime Agency saying, well, we're aware of some of the challenges that exist. So it poses the final question, what's being done?
So things are being done. So Meta, for example, when they see these adverts, they take them down, and they've taken down many of the ones that we flagged to them. They've also just introduced some new technology that detects deep fakes and deals with those. So they're kind of trying to attack this. Apple, when we flagged the apps to them, took them down immediately. They were really proactive with that, and their engineers are notoriously thorough when you check an app. It's famously difficult to get an app on the App Store, so they're now hunting for these casinos within the apps. But ultimately, these are being created with the aid of AI, and all of these scams are getting easier and easier to make and much easier to distribute. So it's kind of, they're sort of fighting a rising tide.
And are we seeing the quality of the scam improve as well as a result of AI?
Yes, but what's really interesting is they're not designed to look really convincing.
Right.
So Matt, for example, in that video, Matt Barber has an Australian accent. He's actually from North Wales. My voice is completely out of sync with my lips. And the idea is if you can skim off the people who are vulnerable enough to believe an unconvincing video, you can then progress them to the next stage of the scam. So you don't really want a really convincing deepfake that everyone's going to go onto this illegal casino of, because they're just not going to fall for the kind of next stage. So the idea is to keep them a little bit unconvincing.
Fascinating, also terrifying stuff. Mickey, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Just worth reminding you, you, of course, can read and watch Mickey's full report on deepfake AI scams, which include Sky News journalists. Do so on the Sky News website and also on the Sky News app. Plenty more insight, analysis and reporting there for you whenever you need it. What also is ready for you is the sport.
Yeah, plenty to come, Gareth, and good morning to everybody. Now, Liverpool are now just one win away from securing the Premier League title after beating Leicester 1-0. Trent Alexander-Arnold scored the only goal of the game in the last 15 minutes. Liverpool can seal the title on Sunday with a win at home to Tottenham Hotspur, or if Arsenal lose at home to Crystal Palace on Wednesday. Alexander-Arnold, who has been strongly linked with a move to Real Madrid in the summer, didn't give much away when asked about his future at Liverpool.
I've said all season, I'm not going to speak on my situation. I'm not going to go into details, but these days like today are always special. Scoring goals, playing, winning games, being close to winning titles as well, being in title races. The special moments that will live with me forever, and I'm glad to be a part of them.
The defeat for Leicester means they are relegated. They have also broken an unwanted record by becoming the first team in top-flight history to go 9 consecutive home games without scoring. Arsenal ensured Liverpool have to wait a little longer to be crowned champions after they beat Ipswich 4-0. After Leandro Trossard opened the scoring, Gabriel Martinelli made it 2-0 after 28 minutes with his 50th goal for the club. Ipswich defender Leif Davis was sent off for a challenge on Bukayo Saka before Arsenal went 3-up, Trossard scoring his second of the game. Substitute Ethan Nwaneri then wrapped up a 4-0 win 2 minutes from time. There were concerns for Saka, however, after he was taken off following that tackle. Manager Mikel Arteta said he's confident it's nothing serious and the winger will be fine to face PSG in the Champions League semi-final first leg a week on Tuesday.
I didn't see the tackle. It was quite fast, so I didn't see it was very far from the bench. But yeah, after watching it, I think it's a good decision for the referee, and thankfully, yeah, he's in a bit of pain, but it doesn't look anything too serious.
After their Europa League heroics, it was another disappointing day in the Premier League for Manchester United, who lost at home to Wolves. The result leaves Ruben Amorim's side 14th in the Premier League with 5 games to go. Pablo Sarabia's great free kick here, the only goal of the game, to make it 5 wins from 5 for Wolves and confirm their Premier League status for another season. For Manchester United, they have now lost 15 games this season. That's their worst performance for 35 years. And there was late drama in West London where Pedro Neto scored in the 3rd minute of stoppage time to give Chelsea a 2-1 win over Fulham. Alex Iwobi gave Fulham the lead before substitute Tyreek George equalised with his first goal for Chelsea before this winner from Neto. The win keeps Chelsea on course for next season's Champions League as they move above Nottingham Forest into 5th. Formula One and McLaren driver Oscar Piastri won the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix to move to the top of the Drivers' Championships. Max Verstappen finished 2nd after he started on pole ahead of Piastri. The world champion was given a 5-second penalty for going off the track here at the first corner. The safety car was also called out on the opening lap following this collision between Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly. Piastri ended up winning by nearly 3 seconds. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc was 3rd, while Britain's Lando Norris was 4th after starting from 10th on the grid. It wasn't a great day for Lewis Hamilton, though. He finished in 7th, and the teams now prepare for the head to the United States for the Miami Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. Celtic will play Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final next month after they cruised to a 5-0 victory over St Johnstone in the semi-final. Celtic captain Callum McGregor was among the goal scorers at Hampden Park. Brendan Rodgers' side remain on course for a domestic treble. It would be the club's 9th treble and their 6th in the last 9 seasons. To golf, and Justin Thomas beat fellow American Andrew Novak in a playoff win at the RBC Heritage and claimed his first win on the PGA Tour for 3 years. Thomas produced this 20-foot birdie putt to win the playoff and his 16th PGA Tour title. Up next for the PGA Tour is the Zurich Classic of New Orleans with Masters champion Rory McIlroy back in action. And that's on Thursday, live on Sky Sports Golf. Now let's take a look at what's making the sports back pages, and the Eye leads on the ups and downs of the Premier League as Liverpool beat Leicester to step closer to the title, while the Foxes were relegated to the Championship. Tar very much. Headlines on the Daily Star as Liverpool defender Trent Alexander-Arnold remained very coy on his future at the club despite his winning goal. While the Times reports on the shock of Manchester City midfielder Kevin De Bruyne, who was not offered a new deal at the club, which he described as a pure business decision. The Monday Night Football sees Tottenham Hotspur host Nottingham Forest. You can see that live on Sky Sports this evening, and we're back with more sport in the next hour.
In the meantime, let's bring up to speed now on the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Changeable this week, showers, prolonged rain. It should become, though, more settled from Thursday. Mostly mild, but southwestern Britain, southwestern Scotland and eastern parts of Northern Ireland are wet currently. Central England and Ireland have showers for their part. Southwestern Britain and Northern Ireland seeing rain clearing to sunshine and showers this morning. Western Scotland and northwest and central England turning wet. Elsewhere, northeastern Britain looks fine, increasingly cloudy. Ireland and the southeast do expect some heavy showers.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we're going to discuss the stories making the papers today with Westminster editor of The Lead, Zoe Grunwald, and the journalist Matt Stanley.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino. This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Time to take a look through the papers, joined by Zoe Grunwald, Westminster editor of The Lead, the journalist Matt Stadlen as well. Appreciate you both coming on a bank holiday Monday. What's the rest of the day got in store?
I'm going to take my 2.5-year-old to Lord's to watch a bit of cricket, and then I'm going to do something really naughty, if my wife lets me, and go to a football game as well.
Oh, double sport. You almost need to be up in Leeds, don't you? So you can go either side of the stadium at Headingley.
Well, exactly.
You can see both at the same time.
Or indeed Trent Bridge, Nottingham Forest.
Very true. It's very... so it's
like
just clocking out.
I'm going to sit on the sofa and think about get over my 4:30 a.m. start this morning.
Watching
I'm sure
TV.
you were earlier than us. But...
A little bit.
Yeah.
That's just because the amount of makeup that needs to be put on his face.
These sort of surprise, unexpected questions is what led me to give a rather confused answer to what my favourite Easter egg was earlier on. I'm glad we managed to sort that out, though.
We did brought clarity to both the papers and also Easter eggs. And also to the fact that MPs, some of them, spending time outside their, parliamentary profession.
So I'd say, in a way, the bigger part of this story is the last very small paragraph. This is in The Guardian. The Labour Party had pledged, as I'm sure viewers will remember, to ban all second jobs, but has since softened its stance. And that's quite reflective, actually, of partly the approach that Labour has had to government. It's realised that it's a bit trickier and a bit tougher, a bit knottier in government than it is in opposition. But on the substance of the story, yes, 7 MPs have spent on an average of 1 working day a week on second jobs this Parliament. Perhaps the most eye-catching name here, as he often is Nigel Farage. He's earned more money than any other MP, it claims here, from second jobs in this Parliament. Reform UK Leaders has declared an average of about 24 hours of work a week as a cameo video creator. I know this in part because I sometimes do battle with him on his television show.
And also, television show, but also a cameo video creator is where members of the public pay for people to record them video messages and send them back out. And the fact that at least, that comes first in the list. It does make you think of the division of busyness for him. It might not all be TV, but some of it might be cameo.
I think also it's interesting because I'm sure Nigel Farage, who does all these things, cameo, GB News presenter, media commentator, public speaker, journalist, brand ambassador, social media influencer, I mean, who has the hours in the day, would argue, well, it doesn't stop him from doing his parliamentary duties. But as this piece very rightly points out, he's only taken part in a third of parliamentary votes this Parliament, while the average MP has voted 72% of the time. That is a significant difference. So, you know, these questions about is Nigel Farage working for the people of Clacton-on-Sea or is Nigel Farage working for Nigel Farage? I think this article potentially presents some answers.
It'd be interesting, though, to see what Starmer and other party leaders, the extent to which they have voted. And this doesn't include abstentions. I want to be careful not to defend Nigel Farage too robustly, but I think he is someone who works hard. I disagree with huge amounts of what he stands for. I think he's a false messiah to the working classes. I do not think Reform UK are going to reform this country if they were ever to get into government. But he does work hard.
It's quite the list, that much is for sure. And actually, he's one of 235 other MPs of the 650 who declared at least some outside earnings, according to the paper, working a combined 32,000 hours between them in the first 264 days of Parliament alone. Of those, 105 declared at least one period of ongoing paid employment.
And I think on the face of it, many of us would think, well, MPs, that is such an important job. We elect you to represent us. It's such a core tenet of our democracy that surely you should just be getting on and focusing on that. I suppose that the counter-argument is, would we attract a lesser calibre of politician if they weren't able to do any outside work at all?
Yeah, I think that the point with Nigel Farage particularly, though, is I don't think anyone can say the man is not working a lot or working hard with all those jobs, but it's whether that time could be better spent working with his constituents. I'm sure the people of Clacton-on-Sea have plenty of issues. And as leader of, you know, Reform Party, I'm sure there are things that Reform members would like Nigel Farage to focus on. So while I do take your point, I think a question about whether MPs could be spending more time in their constituencies and on their parliamentary duties is a fair one.
And also a lot of those MPs will be at board level, etc., etc. And one could also ask you, well, what insight does that give you to the ordinary lives of your constituents? People like Kevin Hollinrake often makes points to him being in small business before he was in politics. And perhaps, you know, maybe there are politicians who have a bit of a better grip on the day-to-day workings of the country than others as a result of those jobs.
Maintaining the link with your constituents and therefore with ordinary people like us is absolutely critical. But, of course, when you do become a leader of a party, particularly when you become a Prime Minister, inevitably you have less time to spend with the people who put you where you are.
One person who has a full-time job...
It's a great segue.
It's a great segue, is the Pope. And this is particularly a busy time for him.
Yes, that's right. So obviously, with it being Easter, major holiday for the Christian community, and we know that Pope Francis has been recovering from a very severe bout of pneumonia, and he's been very poorly. His health has been really in question for quite a few months now. But it's great that he came out on the balcony yesterday at the Vatican, and he cheered and he said, "Brothers and sisters, happy Easter." And of course, all the people who'd gone to see him, who'd made that pilgrimage, were just delighted to see that he was looking healthier. They say his voice sounded stronger as he's recovering from his bout of double pneumonia.
Not everyone would want to meet J.D. Vance when they were recovering from pneumonia.
Yeah, I think Pope Francis has probably been through enough. Didn't need to be subjected to a meeting with J.D. Vance.
On the politics of this, because of course there is politics in religion, his message included his concern for the situation in Gaza, which he described as dramatic and deplorable. He also condemned the worrisome trend of anti-Semitism in the world. And there's an important point there. You can, as I do, condemn Israel's response to October the 7th, which was utterly horrific, October the 7th itself. You can condemn what Israel has chosen to do in Gaza, at the same time deplore anti-Semitism. Those two things can absolutely go hand in hand.
Are you ready for this, Zoe? One person who used to have a full-time job and is less busy this Easter. See,
Very good.
I don't know what's the next jet lag is worse when you travel against the sun. I'll figure that one out in due course. Bear with me. But this is Prince Andrew,
who joined the King and the Queen at the Easter Sunday church service. Obviously, this is going to kind of raise eyebrows because we know that Prince Andrew has been a figure of much discussion since his Newsnight interview in 2019 and questions over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But he seemed to be putting on a rather united front with the royals there. So
And more lately, this embarrassing connection with a man alleged to be a Chinese spy who is not allowed to be in the country anymore, who himself says he is not a Chinese spy. Interestingly, I think, just to reiterate, that it was in January of 2022 that he was stripped of his military roles and also of the HRH title. So, you know, it's a very tricky conversation to have whenever we talk about Prince Andrew, because he hasn't been found guilty of anything, and he denies wrongdoing, and yet he has... I mean, that is a major step for the Queen to have taken, for him to have been stripped of the HRH title. And that's why this is a story, the fact that he is out and about in public in this way for the first time, I think, in a year, is it?
Yes, I wasn't at the Christmas service in Sandringham, for example. And it, you know, you can't help but think, and I know they're not a normal family, obviously they're the royal family, but you have that imagery of, what, last week, the week before, of the King on a royal tour with his wife in Italy on a state visit. Meanwhile, his son, at the same time, is in court suing the state. Meanwhile, his brother, the royal household, is having to come out and put statements out regarding the alleged links to the spy and the alleged activity, which is all, you know, claims and counterclaims and denials, etc. But there's a lot going on.
And Prince William is at Aston Villa, cheering on the Villa.
And now on the Isle of Mull. Cheering on Crofters in the Isle of Mull. I can't do another segue. Jet lag is worse when you travel against the sun.
This is an amazing story, isn't it? The key bit here is apparently the body's circadian rhythm, which I know all about, having used to present radio shows in the middle of the night, or the body clock, as it's probably better known, is less confused, it says here, when travelling westward, because the direction prolongs the body's experience of a normal day-to-night cycle. So, in other words, if you're travelling eastwards, jet lag is even worse.
Yeah, lots of old wives' tales about why jet lag is so bad and when it might be worse and when it might be better. But now we actually have some evidence that everything we probably suspected about travelling eastwards was true, and the reason for it is, as you say, the circadian rhythm.
Really appreciate both coming in with us this morning. Thank you so much. Some breaking news to bring you now. This is a statement from the Vatican. A short while ago, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announced, with sorrow, the death of Pope Francis. With these words, he said the following: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis." At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the indefinite, merciful love of the one and triune God. This is a statement from the Vatican a short while ago. His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announcing with sorrow the death of Pope Francis with the following statement: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis." At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. The statement goes on to read, "With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite and merciful love of the one God." Sadia Chowdhury, our correspondent, joins us for this. This is a statement that has come through to us here at Sky News in just the last few moments.
Yeah, exactly. But we obviously knew that the Pope had been with ill health for a number of weeks now. You may remember on Valentine's Day, he was taken into hospital with respiratory disease, a severe respiratory disease. It was the most serious health crisis that he's been in, and it was the longest time that we'd had him be out of public view. He was in hospital for about 5 weeks, and during that time we'd heard an audio message from him, but we didn't really see him. There was one occasion when he came to the window, and the Vatican also released a photograph of him while he was in hospital. But he was in a very critical condition during that time. And then about 5 weeks after that, they said that he was in a stable condition. So he had come out of intensive care and was in a regular ward. His vital signs had become steady and he was ready to go home. And he was sent home with 24-hour medical care. He had oxygen to hand if he needed it, and he was ordered to rest for about 2 months, and that was, his release from hospital just a mere few weeks ago.
You're watching Sky News, breaking news in the past few moments. Important news that the Vatican has announced that Pope Francis has died. He was 88. The pontiff had been in increasingly frail health in recent months and died in the Vatican after receiving treatment in Rome for a respiratory tract infection in previous months. Francis had been Pope since March 2013, following the resignation of his predecessor, Benedict XVI. He was born in the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires, a city where he was later made Archbishop and became the first Pope from the Americas and the first from outside Europe since the 8th century. He was the first ever Jesuit pontiff. And Sadia, in the last few moments, we've had a statement from the Vatican.
Yes, a statement now confirming that Pope Francis has died. Of course, we knew that the 88-year-old had been seriously ill for now a number of months, and he had appeared at the Vatican just yesterday to wish a happy Easter to thousands of worshippers there. The statement saying, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church." It goes on, "He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the most poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the one and only God."
You're watching Sky News, bringing you the important news of the last few moments that the Vatican has announced the death of Pope Francis. He was 88. He had been hospitalised in Rome, in the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, for double pneumonia. He had received various therapies and treatments for that pneumonia diagnosis. He previously, in his younger years, had part of one of his lungs removed, and thus that complicated his recovery and treatment for pneumonia. This is the live scene, 10:01 local time in Vatican City, showing you images there, and I'm sure St. Peter's Square will fill with the faithful as they learn and start to digest the news that the Vatican has announced that the Pope has died at the age of 88. He'd been in increasingly frail health in recent months. He'd been treated in hospital in Rome, and in recent days we'd seen him hold an audience with around 70 doctors, nurses and other medical professionals who had helped treat him during that hospital stay of almost 40 days. He had thanked them for their care and had said he had prayed for them and asked them to pray for him. In a statement that we've received from the Vatican, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announcing with sorrow the death of Pope Francis, saying that at 7:35 this Easter Monday morning, Monday the 21st of April 2025, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life, the Cardinal says, was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. And Pope Francis chose that papal name in honour of St. Francis of Assisi, gaining a reputation in doing so throughout his papal time as being more outspoken and more political than many predecessors. And he was known for supporting the cause of refugees. He was known for calling on richer nations to increase immigration levels, and he was known for criticising the rise of right-wing populism and calling for action to combat climate change. He became the first pope in the Catholic Church's 2,000-year history to give his approval to same-sex blessings and to declare that homosexuality was not a crime. During his time as Pope, the number of Catholics around the world has grown by 10% during the papacy of Pope Francis. The Church today thought to have around 1.4 billion followers who will now, of course, be mourning the sad news that Pope Francis I has died. We're seeing here live images of Vatican City. We had seen the Pope on the Pope-mobile meeting the faithful of the Catholic Church during the most holy weeks for the Church. 2025 also a particularly significant year for the Church, a year in which celebrations are taking place, 1 in 25 year celebrations were taking place. And now Catholics around the world, 1.4 billion of them, will be reacting to the news that the Pope has died. The Vatican announcing that, and we're joined this morning by Sadia Chowdhury, who's been following this for us, and this will come as a shock because we had seen in recent days an improvement in what appeared to be the Pope's health. He wasn't seen utilising the oxygen cannulas that he'd been using in previous events, and there'd been hope that his condition was improving.
Yeah, exactly. He made an appearance just yesterday at the Vatican St. Peter's Square, wishing thousands of worshippers who are there happy Easter. He said to them, "Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter." He came out in a wheelchair and he waved from the balcony, and his traditional Easter address was then delivered by somebody else, a clergy member. After the blessing, he was driven around the square, and as he passed through the crowds, he paused a number of times as babies were brought to him to be blessed. And it came after that lengthy spell that he had in hospital with that respiratory infection. But of course, that wasn't the first time that he's been in hospital and that he's been ill. In June 2023, he was admitted to hospital for an operation on his intestine. At the time, the Vatican said he'd been suffering recurrent, painful and worsening symptoms. He also had part of one lung removed when he was a young man. So he's someone who has been quite frail, especially over the last few weeks. In 2022, he hinted that he might step down if his health deteriorated. And that was after he was pictured using a wheelchair due to mobility issues that had flared up. So particularly in the last few weeks, very ill, released from hospital, as you said, with oxygen and under 24-hour medical care, and on orders by the doctors to rest. They told him for at least 2 months, and this was just a few weeks ago. So yes, it will be shocking to people who saw him just yesterday milling around the crowd and meeting people. His Easter blessing, which was delivered by a clergy member while he sat looking quite frail, actually, next to him. And in that Easter message, he'd said there can be no peace without freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of expression and respect for the views of others. He remembered the people of Gaza, in particular its Christian population, and said as the conflict causes death and destruction and creates a deplorable humanitarian situation. He also called growing global anti-Semitism worrisome and encouraged all parties involved in the Ukraine war to pursue efforts aimed at achieving a just and lasting peace. He was seen there in a wheelchair just yesterday by the thousands of people that had gathered there at the Vatican St. Peter's Square.
You're watching Sky News, bringing you the news that Pope Francis has died. The Vatican has announced. The 88-year-old pontiff, who was Bishop of Rome and head of the Catholic Church, became Pope in 2013 after his predecessor, Benedict, resigned. In recent years, as Sadia was saying, his papacy has been marked by several hospital visits and concerns about his health. Most recently, that hospitalisation for double pneumonia in Rome's Gemelli Hospital. On previous occasions, he'd needed a wheelchair or cane and was limited in public speaking while struggling in previous occasions to bronchitis and flu. And the Pope has spent time in hospital for other illnesses and ailments. In 2022, he had hinted that he might step down if his health deteriorated after he was pictured using a wheelchair due to mobility issues. That was a flare-up of sciatica at the time. Of course, a reminder that his predecessor, the late Pope Benedict, became the first pope to resign in more than 600 years in 2013, leading to Pope Francis taking to the papacy. His original name was Jorge Mario Bergoglio. He was previously served as a bishop in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And he was a pope of firsts, the first Latin American pontiff, the first Jesuit pope, the first to choose the name Francis, and he did so in recognition of Francis of Assisi. He was selected in just over a day by the papal conclave of March 2013. And for some, he was an unexpected choice, I think it's fair to say. The cardinals who chose him, though, said that he accepted the post with trademark good humour, and the image we show you there shows the smile of Pope Francis that was seen by so many around the world. The sense of humour was a characteristic which set him apart as well. He was described as not being shy, always saying funny things, one to crack a joke. He would risk saying things at the moment that people thought might have been an insult, but according to one theologian, when they looked at his cheeky face, they would also laugh. And even throughout his ailments and illnesses, that sign of a pope for more modern times was always evident. He was one that was prepared to speak out on more political issues than his predecessors had in previous years. He was one who was prepared to talk more openly about issues such as immigration, climate change, and right-wing populism. He was one that also supported the cause of refugees. And of course, what is to come now, Sadia, is many days of mourning and also a service that will commemorate his life, and also the decision to choose a next pope in due course. But for the moment, Catholics around the world, as we see these images of Vatican City, 10:10 local time, will be coming to terms with the news that after this recent period of illness, that double pneumonia, the news that Pope Francis has died.
Yeah, it'll come as a huge shock to some, but perhaps not to others, as you say, who will remember that in the last few weeks he's been particularly ill. But many people will look back at his life longer than the last few weeks. And, you know, as you say, someone who wasn't shy, who was funny at times, who cracked jokes. He was, at ease in the presence of the rich and powerful, but perhaps more comfortable in the company of the poor. Someone who often spoke about people who are disadvantaged around the world, who are facing conflict, as you say, had a special connection with refugees. But he's someone who, at the time of his elections had faced questions over whether he had stayed silent about human rights abuses. And he came into this role, taking over from a living pope when Pope Benedict stepped down due to his ill health in 2013. And he'd really inherited a church in crisis. Pope Francis drew criticism from conservatives in his efforts to reform both finances and policy of the church. In 2018, he travelled to Ireland and apologised for the crimes committed by the church. The victims included the tens of thousands of Irish children sexually and physically abused at Catholic churches, schools and workhouses, and the women who were forced to live and work in the laundries and given up their children if they got pregnant out of wedlock. So someone who felt very deeply for injustices that he'd seen. He'd asked for forgiveness to a crowd of 300,000 people in Dublin, saying, "May the Lord keep this state of shame and give us strength so this never happens again, and that there is justice." So someone who, known for his, compassion, his sense of humour, not being shy at all, and considerably ill in the last few weeks, appearing yesterday to wish people a happy Easter, and then the announcement today that he has died.
Yes, and that image of yesterday as he received the US Vice President J.D. Vance, and we're already hearing international reaction from world leaders to the news that Pope Francis has died. The Dutch Prime Minister saying Pope Francis was in every way a man of the people. The global Catholic community bids farewell to a leader who recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them. We're joined by our Sky News commentator, Alistair Bruce, and I'm minded by that last comment from the Dutch Prime Minister, Alistair. The Pope recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them.
He did, and he led the Roman Catholic Church with a steadiness that was his assurance. And he comes to the end of his life at Easter, which for all Roman Catholics and for all Christians is about the most poignant time that he could conclude his service on earth. And all Christians will understand that for him, the end of his life is the beginning of his eternal life. And of course, it is for the world to reflect upon the papacy that lasted just over 12 years, but of a man who came from Argentina at that extraordinary election, the conclave after Pope Benedict XVI had chosen to step down from the papacy at a time that I think created a moment of tension and struggle for the Church. And Pope Francis brought his own unique identity, a determination to follow a sense of simplicity, to set aside all the grandeur and splendour, as he saw it, of the great office of the papacy and to work through it to be the servant of the servants of Christ. And I think that that will be how he hoped to serve right to the end. And we are not surprised that he's died. He went through a tremendous period of illness. It was extraordinary, really, that he managed to revive enough to celebrate with Roman Catholics and to lead them through the period of Holy Week, which we have just passed through. And I think that it is almost emblematic that his papacy has ended literally within 24 hours of being present amongst the people he was here to lead after Easter Day.
Yes, it is a fitting moment to consider the leadership of the Pope through the Catholic Church, one that at times was troubled, but one that at times was open. He obviously took great strides in recognising members of his church, members of his community, and members that often were marginalised and members that were often struggling in their home countries. He sought to shine light upon those who otherwise sometimes were the victims of politics and of the world around them.
Well, he was a liberal at heart in a time of great change in the world, an expectation of changes of attitudes that actually are affecting all aspects of politics at the moment. And through that, responsible as he was being Pope for the magisterium, which is this sort of a collection of rules and guidances that have come from the Bible, he chose to take people on as a leader. He chose, as often leaders have to be, to, in a lonely and determined way, to take on some of the established ways, attitudes, and views that have moulded the understanding of the Church through time. I'm on board a ship, so you're going to hear an announcement now, and I expect you just might want to come back to me in a few moments.
We will do so. This is a perfect moment to bring in Catherine Pepinster, author of The Keys and the Kingdom, the British Papacy. Catherine, your thoughts at this moment?
Well, I feel incredibly sad that Pope Francis has died after the last few months of such difficulty in terms of illness. We saw him yesterday so breathless, being able to only say just a few words to the people in St. Peter's Square and therefore across the world as well via television, millions of people watching. So delighted to see him again, but he was clearly so unwell. And he has been such a significant figure in the Catholic Church, has changed it in so many ways. particularly in his encouragement of the ordinary people in the pew having more involvement in their church. He spoke, or rather, he wrote yesterday in his message to the world about three major themes: the marginalised and migrant people. He said so much about war, and also spoke about freedom for people to practice their religion, whatever religion that is. And I think those were his abiding concerns during his time as Pope. He travelled so much, of course, in recent months, he's been able to travel across the world. He spoke a very common language to people. He was a great communicator. He was able to engage with people and chat, speak with authority, of course, about faith, but in words that people could understand. A very human leader. His recent memoir even included jokes, gags about himself that he'd collected. When he used to speak regularly when he was well from the balcony of St. Peter's for the prayer that's called the Angelus at midday on Sundays, he used to always finish by telling people, have a good lunch. You know, he was a very human, down-to-earth leader, perhaps because he didn't spend a career in the Vatican, but had come from Argentina, from Buenos Aires, where he was the cardinal, before that a bishop. He used to travel there on the underground, the metro. You know, he was not somebody who stood on ceremony, and so I think people across the world related to him.
And that is a sentiment that is being echoed by world leaders. Just looking at some of the reaction, the German Chancellor saying Francis will be remembered for his tireless commitment to the weakest members of society, to justice and reconciliation. The Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter saying that he was a tireless advocate for peace. His legacy will remain. And it's worth remembering, is it not, that also throughout his time, Catherine, the church has grown. The church, at a time when many nations are seeing people withdraw from religion and leave a more agnostic life, that the church has grown 10% under his leadership. And that must be testament, in part, to the narrative, the messaging, and the way that he has preached the word of the Catholic Church.
Yes, I think so. I think he managed to combine a sense that faith is something very special, that people found something different if they went to church, something sacred and special, but it was rooted in their lives too, in their ordinary lives. You know, they connected with that, I think. I mean, only yesterday, looking at the crowd in St. Peter's Square, such a cross-section of society, probably from all over the world there. And also when I went to church for Easter Sunday yesterday, I was really surprised. I hadn't noticed this before, but I really was surprised at how many young people there were. And just exchanging messages with people this morning, they were saying the same. How many young people were at church yesterday. So I think he's had a part to play in that. I think the other thing that people might remember him for was that he had a real concern about the environment. He wrote about it a lot. He used to call the planet our common home. He saw God's creation as something very precious that we had to look after. And I think that resonated with people too.
And throughout his time as Pope, he was known for the way that he reformed the church, for the fact that he preferred a more simplistic way of working as well. He often used that forward focus in his younger days as his personal vehicle. And in death, he is also bringing about a more simplistic way of tradition, because traditionally a papal funeral, highly elaborate, highly complex, highly orchestrated. But he has decided prior to his passing to scrap many of the traditions. There won't be the body on the raised platform in St. Peter's Basilica. Instead, mourners will pay their respects to his body whilst it remains inside a coffin with the lid removed. He will also be buried outside the Vatican. He will be in one of the papal basilicas instead in Rome. He has been a reformer throughout his entire time as he's led the Catholic Church.
Yes, he made it very clear that he wanted this more simple funeral, and he asked that he should be buried at a church called Santa Maria Maggiore, which was very special to him. He would go there so often to pray. It's a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. I'm sorry about this noise in the background. He brought, I think, his Argentinian style of Catholicism, rooted in a migrant community and in his own family. He learnt so much about his faith at the knee of his grandmother, and he tried to, I think, communicate that to people as well, while also having to be the leader of a huge institution, and an institution which is also influential at the heart of what goes on in the world. You know, the Catholic Church has representation at the United Nations, for example, and he spoke there. He met world leaders. Only yesterday he was seeing the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, briefly, who's in Rome for Easter. So he had to combine the common touch with authority and playing a part on the global stage.
You're watching Sky News. Catherine Peppenster, author of The Keys and Kingdom, the British papacy, joining us here. Following the news that Pope Francis has died, the Vatican has announced. In the past few moments, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales and Archbishop of Westminster, has released the following statement. The death of Pope Francis brings great sadness to so many around the world, both within the Catholic Church and in societies in general. A voice proclaiming the innate dignity of every human being, especially those who are poor or marginalised, is now silent. The legacy he leaves is one we must seek to carry forward and strengthen. Pope Francis was called to priesthood through his experience of the mercy and compassion of God. This remained the core of his ministry as priest, bishop and pontiff. Only in understanding the love and mercy of God towards each other, each one of us, can we fashion societies and communities that bear the mark, the kingdom of God. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, going on to say this same focus and emphasis lay at the desire to see membership of the Church as being rooted in missionary discipleship, a dynamic and powerful vision for every Christian and every community. Now we pray for the repose of his soul, that he may know in full measure the merciful and loving embrace of the Father, of the one God to whom he gave his life in unstinting service. May he now rest in peace and rise in glory. The Catholic bishops of England and Wales will celebrate requiem masses for the repose of the soul of the late Pope in their cathedrals, and prayers will be distributed to Catholic parishes throughout England and Wales. Reaction there from Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the Archbishop of Westminster, President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. And, of course, reaction from around the world. The Israeli President Herzog saying Pope Francis was a man of deep faith, peace and compassion. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron of France, Pope Francis was a man of humility on the side of the most vulnerable and the most fragile. We're also joined by Alistair Bruce, our Sky News commentator. And Alistair, what next for the Catholic Church?
Well, a moment of pause, a reflection upon the leader that has now died and the leadership of Pope Francis, which was in its own way a powerful changing influence on the Roman Catholic Church. And then to this place, the extraordinary buildings that we see that represent the power of a papacy through history, will come all the cardinals to both reflect on that life at the funeral that will take place here at St. Peter's, albeit in slightly diminished form from what popes have been given at the end of their life in the past. But then those cardinals will go into prayer and into preparation for the conclave. And the conclave is the meeting without or within an enclosed space where they consider who the next pope will be. But for the moment, I think a special thought for those who were very close to Pope Francis, who will be very sad today, those nuns particularly who looked after him in the Santa Marta house, which is part of the Vatican City. He didn't live in the Apostolic Palace you can see to the right of our picture there. He chose to do the duties of Pope from there, but he didn't live in it. He lived amongst those others from the church who came to Rome to live and serve out their duties to the Roman Catholic Church. That simplicity. But for those people who looked after him, I think this is a very sad day. For Catholics generally, it's always sad to see the end of a papacy. But as I was saying before, for all Christian believers, an understanding that for Pope Francis, he is now released into eternal life, something that he believed passionately in and which has now taken effect. And the future for him is perfect.
Alistair Bruce joining us and staying with us throughout this coverage here on Sky News. More coverage as well on the website and the Sky News app as we bring you reaction from around the world to this news of this morning. It's 9:30 in London, 10:30 in Vatican City. A reminder of our top story this morning. The Vatican has announced Pope Francis has died. The 88-year-old had been in poor health for some time and had only recently been discharged from hospital in Rome, where he'd been treated for pneumonia in both lungs. The Vatican issued a statement just before 9 a.m. UK time saying the following. Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite, merciful love of the one and triune God. We've also had reaction from the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, currently most senior member of the Church of England clergy. He says in this statement from the Archbishop of York, following the death of Pope Francis, "Let us walk together, work together, pray together." These are the words Pope Francis said to me when we met in 2023. They sum up his vision for the Church, both the Roman Catholic Church, but also ecumenically. Francis's whole life and ministry was centred on Jesus, who comes among us not to be served, but to serve. We saw that compellingly in Francis's service of the poor, his love of neighbour, especially the displaced, migrant, the asylum seeker, his deep compassion for the well-being of the earth, and his desire to lead and build the Church in new ways. Francis showed us how to follow Jesus and encouraged us to go and do likewise. His writings and teachings were supported by his deeds and actions. In their humility and focus on those in the margins, those actions, his whole life was instantly recognisable as one of those who followed Jesus. Pope Francis, Stephen Cottrell, the Archbishop of York, writes, was acutely aware of the division between our churches and how they stand in the way of seeing Jesus Christ more fully. I remember the powerful work the Pope did with the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and the moderator of the Church of Scotland in promoting peace building in South Sudan. He was a listening Pope whose commitment to the principle and process of synodality will be a permanent legacy to the Roman Catholic Church and to all of us. I remember in the brief times I spent with him how holy This man of God was also very human. He was witty, lively, good to be with, and the warmth of his personality and interest in others shone out from him. May he rest in peace and rise in glory. A statement there from Stephen Cottrell, Archbishop of York, referencing there also the Pope meeting with the moderator of the Church of Scotland. Well, reaction from John Swinney, saying, "It is with deep sadness I heard the news this morning of the death of Pope Francis. He was a voice for peace, tolerance, reconciliation in our society. He brought comfort, assurance and hope to many. May he rest in peace." Reaction also from the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, on the death of Pope Francis, saying it is with profound sadness that the world has learned of the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis. You're joining us here on Sky News as we bring you the news of the morning. From the last half an hour or so, the Vatican has announced that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. And our commentator, Alistair Bruce, is joining us throughout the course of the morning. And Alistair, it comes as shock but as little surprise following the Pope's long period of hospitalisation for double pneumonia, the time of his passing.
I think it comes probably as a relief for Pope Francis. And I think that the shock for us all was that he survived so long after such incredible illness. And it's remarkable that he not only revived, but he revived enough to meet the King and Queen, to be present in the Vatican and playing a part during Holy Week, and has now almost miraculously died straight after the celebration of Easter, which for Christians is a profound time of hope and of new beginning. And I think that for Pope Francis, who has had a fascinating pontificate, he has led the Roman Catholic Church for 12 years and more, and he has done so with his determination to pursue simplicity. He came from Argentina. He was perhaps a surprising choice of the conclave after Pope Benedict XVI chose to abdicate. But when we saw him get out of his car as a man who I think most people had thought was ready to leave the earth when he became ill, and then to travel amongst so many people and bring hope and understanding of the message of Easter to those who he was able to interact with, I think that was perhaps his last miracle. And it was the way in which he played his part, always wanting to give a steadiness at the centre of the church, to provide a leadership. And as the Archbishop of York's message said, he was committed to synodality, which is a style of leadership of the church that he had sought to change during his pontificate, and I think had set a 3-year intent for it to be moved forward on his demand and as part of his leadership. And I think he will hope that that continues. And I would imagine that for the Roman Catholic Church now, inevitably, a moment of pause, a moment of reflection. But we remember when he was first brought to the great loggia to be introduced as the new pope by the then proto-cardinal, the cardinal deacon, who was Jean-Louis Thuram, and who read out the name by which he wished to lead the church as Francis, the first Francis to be Pope and to be a successor to St. Peter, which is what all Roman Catholics believe. It has been a remarkable over 12 years, and he's met people all across the world with leadership and opportunities to shape the world. And his influence was great, and again referred to by the Archbishop of York in his message just now. That remarkable occasion when Pope Francis went to South Sudan with Ian Greenshields, who was then the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, and also Archbishop Justin of Canterbury, to try and bring peace to a difficult part of the world. And it was, I think, always his determination to try and encourage peace and to try and cut through the stupidity of humanity and to find that message of eternal kindness and love, which I think he tried his best throughout his life, which has just ended, to promote.
It makes me also think back, Alistair, to his interfaith dialogues and agreements that he brokered between the Catholic Church and Islamic faiths as well. He worked tirelessly to build bridges, the first ever Pope to travel to Iraq in 2021, his acceptance of the LGBTQ+ community as well, unprecedented within the Catholic Church. Let's bring in Kaya Burgess, religious affairs correspondent at The Times. And the Pope was a reformer, and at times the Church and some within it struggled with the degree of reform that Pope Francis looked to bring.
Yes, there was always the struggle, as so often in churches, between those who felt that he was an extremely liberal voice and went sort of too far in terms of changing some of the church's traditions, but then clearly those who wanted to see him go a lot further. Some saw him as quite radical, but then that's kind of within the confines of kind of Catholic teaching, insofar as he hasn't changed anything enormously major in terms of allowing gay couples to marry in church or allowing women to become priests, but has made much more sympathetic comments on those sorts of topics, which clearly sort of angered the more conservative side of the church. And what begins now is to see that his legacy will really be cemented by who succeeds him. Will it be someone like-minded who carries on his particular stance and attitude to things? Will it be someone who wants to reverse that? That will be a big question over the next few months.
He also had a very unique situation that for the first time in 600 years, he took over from a living pope when Pope Benedict stepped down due to his ill health in 2013. And there was that situation of the two popes, one serving in the papacy, the other Pope Emeritus. To what degree do you think did that influence or shape the work of Pope Francis?
Exactly. A really fascinating situation to have arisen, given how almost entirely unprecedented it was, certainly for centuries. And he was quite a different pope as well, in terms of the fact that he took different approaches to things. The traditional Latin Mass, which Pope Benedict tried to be sort of more accepting of people conducting Mass in the old Latin form, whereas Francis kind of cracked down on it, and you wondered whether, there was tension there, for example. People did wonder, actually, given as Pope Francis's health started to fail, if perhaps that Benedict might have set a precedent, and that maybe Francis would have said, well, actually, I too am going to step down if my health no longer allows, and it might have become a new thing that, archbishops of Canterbury, for example, don't continue on until they die. They tend to step down and have a retirement age. And there were hints early on that perhaps that might happen, but clearly Francis have felt that this was a role for life.
And as we see these images of Vatican City as St. Peter's Square fills, and we see these images now of the Pope, it's evident the smiles, the waves of his engaging personality, and of a personality, Kaya, that very much brought together everybody from the most vulnerable in society to world leaders, and brought about unity in a way that other popes hadn't previously done.
He was clearly a pope who, he wasn't just a sort of theologian who was happiest with his books, and he wasn't just happiest sort of sitting in a palace somewhere sort of issuing decrees. That he clearly seemed to come alive the most when he was out on the streets meeting people. It's something that I know Justin Welby spoke about in their kind of friendship, I suppose you could say. Really, they worked together quite closely on a number of things, and they both came into their roles at a very similar time, and obviously left their roles in different ways at a similar time. He clearly was a pope who was most comfortable and sort of happiest out meeting people.
Kaya Burgess, religious affairs correspondent at The Times. Good to have you with us. Further international reaction following the announcement of the death of Pope Francis. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, saying the following: Pope Francis has returned to the house of the Father. This news saddens us deeply because a great man and great pastor has left us. I had the privilege of enjoying his friendship, his advice and his teachings, which never failed, even in moments of trial and suffering. In the mediations of the crucifix, he reminded us of the power of the gift, which makes everything flourish again and is capable of reconciling what in the eyes of man is irreconcilable. Reaction too from Kemi Badenoch. Pope Francis spent his final Easter yesterday bearing witness to the faith he devoted his life to, a quiet presence at a time when the world needed humility, courage and conviction. Kemi Badenoch going on to write, his death on Easter Monday feels especially poignant. He reminded us that leadership isn't about power, but about service. When I met him in 2022, he spoke warmly of the UK and the values we share. In a world that too often turns away from faith, he stood firm. May he rest in peace. Well, joining us on Sky News is Father Francesco Giuliano, a professor of theology at Catholic University and a diocesan priest as well. This news comes at a time after the Pope spent those 2 months in hospital for pneumonia. We had, though, seen him yesterday greeting worshippers on Easter Sunday. How are you reacting to the news of his passing?
Thank you for having me on today. And let's say that it was not really much of a surprise for us because we did see the health of the Pope was quickly diminishing right before our eyes. It was very weak. He wasn't able even to lift his hands. We saw many images of that recently. He did his best to appear where he could for the Holy Week and prior to the Holy Week. In fact, I think you can see even at the Orbi et Orbi, the blessing for Easter, he wasn't even able to raise his hand. So he was definitely not feeling well. So this doesn't take us by surprise. Many of us have been praying for him and for a holy death, really, so that he would die in peace. I mean, that's what we often have to do in the church. We teach this. There's a devotion to Saint Joseph that you pray for a holy death, that you be received properly, that you have all the sacraments and you be prepared to die. There's whole books by Saint Alphonsus Maria de Liguori on how to prepare yourself for death, because in the Catholic Church we teach that essentially what it is the eternal life is what we're here for. This is just a phase of our lives here. It's just temporary. And so for us, death is seen, in a sense it's determining. So how did you live your life here? And what's that going to say about your eternal life? And what's really fascinating about this is that he passes away on the first day of the octave of Easter. There's 8 days, Easter is an octave. It's 8 days of Easter. And Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, passed away at the octave, the 8th day, which he had also called Mercy Sunday, and he died on that day. So it's very interesting that Pope Francis dies within the octave as well. And and we think back also 20 years ago, on the 19th of April was when Pope Benedict XVI became Pope. I mean, I was around then looking at all this. So I remember all of this, and so these. What happens with this Pope makes me think about the previous popes as well, and how they passed away, how they came to be and everything. And I also remember when John Paul II died, that there was a lot. It was an outpouring of love for him. And there was a lot of also a lot of enthusiasm that came with the election of Pope Benedict XVI, because he was so close to Pope John Paul II. So it was like the continuing of a reign. And now I think about, what's Pope Francis, what's for us now. We often think about this. We think about the Pope that's passed away. We pray for him, and we continue to pray for him. And but then we also think about what's next. Who's going to succeed him. And certainly, what Pope Francis has left us is different than what Pope John Paul II left us. The things have changed. The times have changed dramatically since 2005. It's only 20 years ago, but times have changed. Pope Francis also, he created the College of Cardinals, an extended College of Cardinals. There are 138 electing cardinals now. There was a limit that Pope John Paul II had put, and that was in the norms for 120. And Pope Francis has made 138. He made recently a good number as well. And it's not just the numbers, but also the diversity of the cardinals. that are going into the conclave, which makes it very interesting to think about who is going to be the next pope, because people are predicting here, there, but there's so many cardinals that don't even know themselves very well, because also in this papacy there haven't been enormous amount of meetings, consistories. He hasn't invited the cardinals in big consistories, as used to be the case. So things have changed. The way that he governed, and the way that the church, that the church has been the last 12 years. Things, as you've been mentioning, there has been some changes, and so that makes us wonder what's in the future.
As we're speaking, just reaction from Moscow. The Patriarchate there saying Pope Francis played a significant role in the active development of contacts between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. That's the TASS news agency in Russia, saying that the Moscow Patriarchate acknowledging the significant role of the active development between the contacts of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And as we discuss here on Sky News with Father Francesco, I'm interested, from your perspective as a diocesan priest, what it was like, what it has been like to administer Mass and the Holy Communion in the Church of Pope Francis under his leadership. What has that meant on a daily basis for you, administering the communion to the faithful of the Catholic Church?
Well, for me, it hasn't changed very much. Actually, it's, Mass, we had the sacraments as usual, and I can't say that it necessarily changed that much. He emphasized a lot the pastoral approach of reaching out to the people, listening to the people, and in that sense, he really did emphasize that, and he emphasized, this listening thing, the listening church, you would call it, so that we would listen to what people would say. But I personally, I've always kind of been like that. So for me, it personally didn't change very much. That I've been very much, I think a priest needs to be, in general, I've said this a while, I was talking to a bishop the other day, and I said, if one is going to have a vocation to be a priest, one has to be a person that dialogues, that speaks with other people, and that is able to relate to other people. It's not enough just to be an intellectual who knows a lot of different things, but you also have to be you have to know that what is to know to help others. Because our ministry is a spiritual ministry, and a spiritual ministry means that we have to share from our prayer life with others. So this is part and parcel to being a priest. And Pope Francis always emphasized this. He showed this by, when he began his ministry as Pope, he would have the public masses in the Vatican at Santa Marta. There would be people coming over. He really tried to show us what it is like to be a priest, preaching daily, talking daily, and all this to people. Obviously not everyone has the same charisms, so not everyone is able to preach daily or whatever. It doesn't, but what's important is how close you are essentially to God, first and foremost, and how much you're able to then, from that closeness, the unity to God, to give to others. I think that's something that I don't see how that's changed in any way since the other. What Pope Benedict would do, he had the year of the priesthood. He had the year in 2010, the year of the priesthood, trying to emphasize the role. He would be much more explicit in teaching us that. And Pope Benedict also emphasized more the role of the liturgy in the priesthood, and how to take care of the liturgy carefully. Pope Francis, liturgy wasn't really the focus of his papacy. It wasn't what he was focusing on. He was focusing more on, public relations and trying to build bridges. And also what Pope Francis tried to do was to build bridges with those that were not coming to church. And that was one of the things that he kept doing. That's what you just mentioned, the Orthodox Patriarch, he was always doing things like that. Like he the first Pope to go to Saudi Arabia, things like that. He was really trying, I think, to build bridges with people. And sometimes misunderstood, or made comments that could have been prepared better, maybe, so there was always misunderstandings that were taking place, like also in the commentaries and on the airplanes, and when he would give his interviews, there were always news events afterwards, So yeah, what he tried to do, I think he tried to do what JP2 did also, and I think even Benedict, the papacy since Paul VI, well, I can say since Pius XII really, has been much more mediatic and out. The papacy, historically speaking, since the 1700s, has been much more vocal with the oncoming and the use of encyclicals to reach out to people. And so, what Pope Francis tried to do is try to really go directly to the people, and that's good. But is that always the way to do? These are all questions that are arbitrary questions, essentially. How do you go to the people? Could you go to the people directly, one-on-one, or do you go to the people, by going in this hierarchical structure, taking care of like Benedict XVI? He went to the people, but he also really took care of his mode of governing was much more classic. He was dealing with the cardinals, the bishops, the priests. It kind of went down. It was a trickle-down effect, you can say, almost, which is fine, because the church believes in the concept of subsidiarity. So you have the centrality of the church, but then you have to have the subsidiarity. You have to have the governing of the church on the lower level. And this is an important concept, because it's in the modern age that we've really focused so much on the papacy as a whole, and knowing what the Pope has said every last 5 minutes or whatever. It's very much something that's emphasized because of the media right now. But if you think about the Middle Ages, most people didn't even know who the Pope was. Now we know immediately. Every time he breathes, we know that he's done something. So that changes the dynamics of how one has to be a Pope. So I think he's a Jesuit. He was a Jesuit, so it's teaching. They're teachers by vocation. They're missionary by vocation. They go out, and so I think he applied his spirituality to the way that he was a pope.
Father Francesco Giordano, really appreciate you sharing your time and insights with us. Thank you. You are watching Sky News. I want to bring you now the moment from an hour ago when the Vatican announced the death of Pope Francis.
Carissimi fratelli e sorelle.
Dear brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially toward the poorest and most marginalized. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the triune God.
The announcement made earlier today, in the past hour, of the death of Pope Francis, who was 88. And as we see this live shot of Vatican City, Alistair Bruce, we see mourners and crowds gathering in St. Peter's Square, and the death of the Pope following that double pneumonia and that long hospitalisation comes as little surprise and, as you previously said, possible relief for the Pope himself.
Moving when you see this immense, great building at the heart of Rome, the Vatican City, and there St. Peter's, marking the end of another papacy. There is so much history of that place and its influence around the world. And during the last 12 plus years, Pope Francis has been that focus, that influence, and his extraordinary determination to change the Roman Catholic Church with the same desire to maintain the true principles of his faith in that process, to always serve those who were marginalized. And I think at this moment of his death, which comes almost miraculously after the celebration of Easter itself, which is for all Christians a moment of hope, of the resurrection, the belief in Jesus Christ being resurrected to eternal life and being constant. The idea that for Pope Francis, he has returned to that. And it is, in its own way, the most wonderful news for him, but a moment of change for the Roman Catholic Church as it now contemplates, in his absence, who should lead next and carry on in this long succession of popes that goes right back to St. Peter, and St. Peter himself, who walked, we believe, on earth with Jesus Christ. So for that to be done, all focus on Rome.
Alistair Bruce, our Sky News commentator, joining us this morning. You join us here on Sky News as we bring you reaction from around the world to the announcement by the Vatican this morning, just at around 9 o'clock UK time, that Pope Francis has died. He died at 7:35 local time at the age of 88, following that hospitalisation in Rome for that double pneumonia earlier this year. He had spent time recovering in Vatican City, seen yesterday with the faithful, but today the announcement that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88.